Hello. Hey. What's going on, everybody? Let me pull up. StreamYard is confusing. I'm just going to watch this chat from the YouTube page. Thanks for stopping by. Mark is going to be here. I sent him the link. I guess I'll be here in a few minutes. This is just kind of like a more low-key conversation about Rings of Power, or maybe like adaptations in general and things like that. We'll probably talk for about an hour, maybe hour and a half. But yeah, hi everybody. How are you? Has everybody seen the show here, or are there some people that are just like not watching it? I had to watch them twice for the debate last night. So I think personally, after rewatching both episodes, I think episode 2 is stronger. And has fewer pacing issues. But yeah, I think that my biggest issues with the show so far are the prologue was kind of super ambiguous, and I don't think it's super satisfying for Tolkien fans, and I don't think it's satisfying enough for like normies either. Like, I wish they would have done more with that, at least for like the normie crowd. But there's a lot of people apparently who are like confused about like what the hell even was going on with the tree. And yeah, if you don't know the lore, the 2 trees of Valinor were destroyed by Morgoth and Ungoliant, or Ungoliant. I can't pronounce it. It's a giant spider. Tolkien had arachnophobia, so he wrote giant spiders into his stories as like villains. And yeah, I don't think they have the rights to that character. So they did include spider webs. If you watch the prologue, you can see the spider webs on the trees, which is really interesting. It's a cool nod to people who have read like the expanded lore. There's a lot of, I don't know how many people that are watching right now that have actually read the expanded lore or the books. Maybe I'll put up a poll later, but just so you guys know, there's a ton of nods to the like lore enthusiasts. I know a lot of lore enthusiasts don't like the show, but there's a ton of nods to like the expanded lore. There's Feanor's hammer. That's one of the more obvious ones that Elrond was like looking at. There's just a bunch of stuff. There's the way that Khazad-dûm is filmed in the show. We see those giant mirrors that are bouncing light off the walls down into the depths of like the Khazad-dûm. That actually is described like specifically in the book like that. Like that's how they, I don't know, I can't remember if it's like how they grow plants or if it's how they just have light reflecting in so people can see. But it is in the books, and it was really cool for them to add that. They didn't have to do that, but it was really interesting, I thought. Yeah, I love Berserk too. Berserk is godlike. I'm only on volume 10. I'm like, part of me is like, I don't want to finish it, or I don't want to catch up to its current location in the manga, because I like having like 3 epic volumes ahead of me. I don't know, it's like a psychological thing. But yeah, I love Berserk. Okay, so we have some Silmarillion fans in the chat. Marsupial Gamer. I never read the Silmarillion front to back. I've read parts of it, and my friends have explained like a bunch of stuff from it. It's very hard to read. Even for me, like I read a lot. Like I have a pretty big library of books that I read, but it's difficult to get into. Right now though, I'm gonna dive back in because I'm kind of hyped. I've been playing Lord of the Rings online. I just pre-ordered the new Tolkien book that's coming out in November. It's called The Fall of Numenor. I wonder if I can pull this up. Oh, it's going to show my address. I'm not going to pull that up. Hold on a second. So Tolkien wrote, basically this new book's coming out. And it's a collection of everything about the Second Age that Tolkien has ever written. And a lot of the stuff in the Second Age is collected in like four or five different books. Like you'd have to read parts of the Silmarillion, parts of Unfinished Tales. If you want to get all of the Second Age content, it's very scattered. But I'll see if I can pull this up. Give me 1 second. Oh, Mark's here.
Yeah, I've been here for a while.
Sorry.
No, it's totally okay. Like you've been audible on my stream. If anyone wants to go over to Rumble, a streaming service that is not gigantic, then that's where I'm kind of mirroring the stream, and I'm playing a game called Roller Drum. Are you showing footage or anything from the show?
I don't know about that.
Okay, because I told people, I was like, not that I really have anyone watching me right now, or if I do, it's like 2 people. But I said, yeah, to go to your thing, because I don't know if you've got any visual components lined up or anything. I'm just going to be kind of playing video games that are not story-based, so that I can technically still be gathering gaming stream data for Rumble, which is what I've been tasked with. That is,
God.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, because I can kind of just, I've almost been exclusively playing my Steam Deck and just playing random emulated games on it, and then like I'll watch the stream back and like try to be like, okay, like yeah, the resolution dips here and that, or things like features to add. So I'm asking people to suggest, hey, like, is there some sound alerts and things like that you would want them to add? So because they are apparently very interested in making their streaming service more worthwhile, and I'm up for helping out new.
Yeah, Rumble and Odyssey, I think both are doing some changes. I've heard some things behind the scenes. I won't get into specifics, but Odyssey's making some interesting moves, I think.
Yeah, and Odyssey, I think Odyssey is really cool too. I know that they and Rumble have had a bit of a spat with each other, and I as much as like Rumble is someone I'm helping out with their stuff. It's I don't really want to take a side in any business like corporate war thing. It's not really what I'm into. I think there's room for a whole bunch of different streaming services, especially like ones that are like, you know, YouTube style, like independent content creation ones where you don't have to have a subscription. You just have to say, hey, I'm going to spend my time here, and might be an ad that plays every so often, and that's how they make money.
So I don't know if you were familiar with this, but they're releasing a new Tolkien book in November.
Yeah, no, I was hearing what you were saying about it. And I should, like, I guess preface this too, is that as far as like what my background is with like Tolkien and everything like that. I read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy when I was in high school. I am now 38 years old. I've seen the Peter Jackson trilogy of movies countless times. Like I absolutely love those. Played a whole bunch of the games and stuff. Never played the Lord of the Rings online that you said you were getting back into. I'm really actually good. Like, honestly, like I've been playing Final Fantasy 14 with X-Ray Girl, and it's the first time I've really gotten into an MMO since the 3 months that I played WoW when I was in my last year of university and had just broken up with my high school girlfriend. And I stopped playing WoW because I realized that I was in my last year of university. And in those 3 months, I spoke to no women.
Jeez.
And I was like, yeah, I've got to stop playing World of Warcraft.
That's all my friends are the same way.
Not because it's bad, though. I was like, because this is too much fun. Like I'm so much more likely to decide to do this on a Friday night than to like go out and party and spend money.
That's how I feel about, honestly, I'm not an MMO person, but that's how I'm feeling right now about Lord of the Rings Online. Like it's very similar to World of Warcraft, but you can sink so many hours into it. The fact that you can travel anywhere in Middle Earth, like it's crazy how big the world is. And like it's organic. Like you can walk from Bree, where you can get on a horse and ride to Weathertop. You can
and see everything on the way.
It's pretty amazing. It's dated, but it's charming. It's like it hasn't aged horribly.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, man, for the last few days, I've mostly been playing like old games emulated on my Steam Deck, and it's been a blast. I played for the first time ever. I've been playing Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword, And I gotta say, it's pretty good. Like that was one that I was kind of heard was like sort of shitty, and I'm like, I don't know. Like once you get out of and actually, you came up on my stream because the place is called Skyloft. Like, I wonder if this is Lofty's homeland.
Well, no, that's a great game.
Lives in the sky.
People I wish. No, Castle in the Sky is probably more of an influence. I love that.
Yeah.
movie.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I had the music playing in the intro and like one of the first songs.
Oh, right on. I actually haven't seen that movie in years, but Miyazaki's fantastic. Both Miyazakis are fantastic. The Souls one and the beautiful anime one.
Yep,
even though
absolutely.
Grave of the Fireflies makes me want to kill myself. But I think that was its intention. But man, that's a rough one to watch. It's like the Requiem for a Dream of anime.
It is. It's hard to watch. But yeah, have you ever, just before we get into Rings of Power, have you ever played the game Lord of the Rings? Oh shit, I can't remember the name of it now.
Third Age?
The Third Age, the RPG.
Yeah, Third Age was really good. Yeah, it's basically so Final Fantasy X, but Lord of the Rings. Yeah, it's good.
It might be the best Lord of the Rings game. Like honestly, I was watching my brother play it again, and like dude, the music's really good. The combat is really good. Like
I think the two that I would see, it is really good, and I do like the story in it quite a lot as well, or at least I remember liking it. I haven't played it in years, obviously. I think it was a game I had on Xbox. I want to say like original Xbox. But there's the Return of the King kind of beat 'em up, like Devil May Cry style one that they were doing. They were doing those. They did one for Two Towers and one for Return of the King, and the Return of the King one was co-op, where the Two Towers one, it seemed like it was like Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers. It was all based on the movie, and dealt with a lot of the movie locations, the likenesses of the actors and everything. And it like the co-op one for Return of the King though was so much fun, and it was like, oh yeah, this is the game they wanted to make the first time.
Someone in the chat is asking about Shadows of Mordor. That's
I was gonna get there, and I was like, and now like the game kind of changed with Lord of the Rings adaptation video games, because Shadow of Mordor, even if it's not your kind of game, it's really hard to deny that there's a lot about that game that really, really works. A Shadow of War, I think less so, because it had a lot of the novelty was kind of worn off, and there was a big grindy section at the end. I hear I didn't play through all of Shadow of War, but part of it was because everyone was like, yeah, it really falls apart towards the end, and I'm like, oh, that sucks. But Shadow of Mordor plays really, really well, and even if you're like, oh, well, it's just Arkham / Assassin's Creed ripoff, it's like, yeah, but that the Nemesis system is pretty cool. Like, I hear it's hard to make the argument that isn't an extremely innovative and like kind of almost entirely unique, because it has not really been done since, which is kind of nuts.
It was copyrighted. I think someone bought the system
that was that was a big controversy a while back. It was Warner Interactive that was trying to copyright it, but I think that the copyright is written so specifically that they really don't have the rights to anything except for like the exact way it's done in Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. The thing is though, or like what I think I'm this isn't my thought. I'm pretty sure it's Bellular, but I'm not 100% sure, so I might be misquoting. But was saying that what their intention might have been was to write the trademark kind of vaguely in a way where it could be not argued as like any kind of antitrust type thing, or like anti-competitive thing, where you just like saying if id tried to copyright the first person perspective in the 90s, like it would be like, okay, well, you can't really copyright a whole perspective like that. Could be really argued as anti-competitive. So they wrote it in a way that it wouldn't just get thrown out of court immediately. Or like, but the thing is though, because it's still there and it is vague, if you're, say, I don't know, Bandai Namco, and you want to do a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure with a Nemesis system, I don't know, like anything, like an Elden Ring, but with Nemesis system or something like that. You might think twice about implementing that system. If you're thinking there's a chance Warner Interactive could sue us now, like it's like,
Yeah, I think there's other things. There's other systems and games that have been going through similar things like that. Wait, I just wanted to say, I saw another comment. I think a good starting point into this conversation is that somebody said, are the games canon, or are they their own thing?
Like Shadow of Mordor?
Yeah. So I think what we should do is I'll give my perspective on what I think, how to just answer that question, and then also while referencing Rings of Power, because I think a lot of people are confused about this.
Yeah.
So,
well, I guess my perspective on the video, like I think because it'll be pretty easy. Like obviously the video games based on the movies are as canon as they can be with the movies, assuming obviously like a video game experience is never going to be in canon with a movie where you're moving through the same events perfectly because you're controlling one and you're not controlling the other. But ostensibly the story is the same in both. So it's like, well, okay, yeah. So I guess they're canon with each other. As far as what's canon with the books, I think you could probably make the argument that Peter Jackson's movies are not canon with the books.
No,
there are like, I mean, so like it's a bit different than like say Star Wars, where there is supposed to be one unified canon where you can read books that'll give you background, which is applicable to the movies and the video games and. Results may vary as far as their execution, but that is apparently their intention.
But it's very different. People compare this a lot to how they're quote unquote ruining the canon, like Star Wars. I've seen that comparison all over Twitter, all over comments. They're not, because literally nothing is canon except the books.
Yeah, and that's why I don't think I would make that argument against it.
Yeah, it's a terrible argument.
Actually, it was the reason I was I was sorry. I was just going to clarify. The reason I was trying to say that, like, hey, like I did read the books. It was a long time ago. I've never read the Silmarillion. I've never read Unfinished Tales. I would not at any point call myself like a Tolkien super fan. I say I definitely like his writing a lot, and all of his books that I've read, I've truly enjoed. Yeah. And like I said, those Peter Jackson movies are probably amongst my favorite cinematic experiences of my life. Yep, but and I guess, well, like spoiler alert, I did not like Rings of Power. But my arguments against it are not coming from a place of because it's not Tolkien perfectly. I mean, I think that that argument has validity, and I think that I'm just not the one to make it, right? Because like you probably know more about Lord of the Rings lore than I do, and
not
it's
much.
Like,
I doubt if you've read the trilogy, if you've read The Hobbit. And
yeah, but like I mean, I read them when I was like 15. Like it was like around 23 years ago at this point. So it's like I don't. Although X-Ray Girl has been listening to the Andy Serkis audiobook. It's amazing. And she listens to them in bed at night, and it was upsetting me about Rings of Power even more because you kind of realize how in the Peter Jackson trilogy, it's a lot of the dialogue is like spot on, like it's like right from the book. Because you're like, oh man, this is like line for line. I didn't remember it being that close because I read the books before the movies were even announced ever.
Oh yeah,
like it was the kind of thing. Or I mean, they might have been announced, but I maybe had not. I had not seen Fellowship of the Ring by the time I had finished reading all the books. I know that for sure.
Well, so, there are some things that are obvious, like they have no choice but to write some original dialogue for the trilogy. Like,
well, because you're at the very least you got to condense some things.
Yeah, like that would be unrealistic to say otherwise, that they can't do that, because it's just, even the Arwen scene doesn't bother me. Like the fact that they have in the films. Now, once again, it's not canon, so it's not destroying the universe that I love. But what they did is they in the books, Elrond, when Frodo's being chased by the ring wraiths across, I think that was it the Anduin River. I can't remember. No, that was
when Arwen comes and saves him in the movie.
Yeah. So what happened is Frodo takes Shadowfax, I think, across the river, and the ring wraiths are following him by himself. And when they cross into the water, Elrond calls forth and Gandalf. They're actually combine their power to do this, because Gandalf is the one who forms the horse heads in the water. If you watch the movie, there's like water shaped horses.
Yeah.
That's Gandalf actually contributing along with Elrond
escape,
to basically annihilate the ring race, and then they have to go back to Mordor to regroup. But Arwen does it in the films, and it's just that's something that never happened. A lot of people at the time were praising it as I don't know. I went back and read old articles lately. People were praising it for having like a strong female moment, women moment. which is, I don't know if that's exactly why they did that, but for me it worked. I thought it was cool because I love Liv Tyler. I think she's amazing.
Yeah, I miss
But,
her. She used to be in so much more things, or so many more things.
But so that's like an example of like, them completely changing like a major part of the story. They also killed Saruman way too early in the Return of the King.
Yeah.
And they, elves showed up at Helm's Deep, which never happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff that's different. But yeah, like I said, that none of that stuff bothers me. It does bother some people, and
yeah, and I mean, I'm sympathetic to that. I can't like wholeheartedly agree because it's like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess I remember those things being kind of different, but I don't know. I guess like because at this point, I think it's very safe to say, and it would be dishonest of me to not say that I am now more familiar with the movies than I am with the book.
Yeah,
like there was a period of time of probably about 2 years where that was not the case, but now it is. So it's kind of hard for me to even wrap my head around. I don't know, like, is there stuff about the movies that I would really change? Like, and if the answer to that was yes, which honestly I think it's probably leaning a lot closer to no than it is to yes. Because like I don't think there's a whole lot I would change about, especially the extended. Well, I mean, again, like I don't really like using the term perfect, but at the same time, it's like I can't reasonably think of a suggestion I could make to make those movies better. Yeah. Whereas that's not the case with most media I watch. Like I feel like, wait, this is a thing that would have been so easy for them to do. It would have made this significantly better. So why wasn't there someone in the writer's room that's like, hey, how about instead of doing this thing that you have on the page that's really dumb, we do this thing that's going to be like the same cost to us. It's going to be just as easy to shoot, but it solves this massive problem that you've created for no reason. Like, it just seems like to me that there's a lot of that going on in modern writing.
Yeah.
I think you almost with
that about Rings of Power for sure. You could say that also about the Rings. Yes. Another thing would be oh man, I'm going to butcher his name. Faramir's arc in The Return of the King is way more susceptible to the ring than he is in the books. I'm rereading The Return of the King right now. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I believe in the books he actually, I think him and like he's one of the very few people that the ring just like doesn't affect. And I think that's supposed to mean something significant in the book. I just think they got rid of that, and maybe that's something that they could have fixed.
Well, I mean, and I think I could make a justification for that. Like again, without having so if there's a Tolkien superfan in the audience, understand that I'm not saying, well, it's more like the books because that's not at all what I'm saying. I said I think I could make an argument as to why Faramir not having that explored in great depth makes more sense for making a movie, because if you have to if you have to take time to explain why Faramir maybe is someone who could hold the ring that is not Frodo, but but ultimately Frodo still ends up at Mount Doom, and like so it's like, so why do that arc with Faramir? And I mean, you can maybe make a case for it. I just think it's like, well, it does, like, it sort of just throws another element into this plot that is not going to really be important ultimately, and this movie's pushing 12 hours.
Yeah, so I think we should get into the weeds of it, because now we're talking about adaptation.
Okay.
I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
As somebody who hasn't read any of the Second Age content or familiar with a lot of the stuff, does when you hear criticisms of, like, for example, Elrond and Durin, their friendship is like, fucked up in the show. It should have been Celebrimbor and I can't remember his name, this other dwarf, or something like that, or like Galadriel has never went to Numenor in the Second Age, right? It's another big one everybody complains about. As somebody, like, do these things bother you? Even though
sometimes yes, and I can tell you when it does. When it seems Like, take for example, it's probably not a great example these days because, especially like after their Obi-Wan takes, I'd like to not, I'd like to get away from using them as the gold standard of like internet movie criticism. But like, if you think of Red Letter Media sort of going into why Elrond is in the position that Celebrimbor should have been in that story. Like assuming that you're 100% accurate about that. And again, I'm not claiming to know exactly what it's supposed to be
No,
like.
I think,
But
I think Celebrimbor. Just to clarify, Celebrimbor is still going to do what his thing in the show, but
yeah,
they're
because
giving
he is
Elrond.
there. He's in Moria. Like,
Yeah, I think they're giving Elrond more to do, and they're building a
and
relationship.
exactly.
Yeah.
But like, I think the big question is why give Elrond more to do if you're taking things away from Celebrimbor? And I mean, the cynical part of me wants to say it's because like there's a clapped when I saw it element of it's like, oh, it's Elrond, it's Hugo Weaving's character, and like it seems like the reason for that being the case is not deeper than just we want them to have an I clapped when I saw Elrond do the thing moment. And again, like maybe that's not it, and they've got a much more in-depth and rewarding arc planned for it. But considering where I think the quality of the show is at now, I'm more inclined to think they're just like, well, we've got to make this show. Who is alive that's in the Peter Jackson movies that's around in the Second Age? Galadriel, Elrond. Okay, cool. They're the stars of the show. It's like, wait, what? Like, really? Like, should we make them the stars of the show? It's like, yeah, we'll have Galadriel the Barbarian, fucking like one shot, like soloing the ice trolls, and it's like, wait, hold on, what? Yeah. When was like? I mean, honestly, I would have been so much more impressed if Galadriel had the ice troll come up, the elves were like dying, and she just like cast a spell and like killed it. Like that would be the kind of thing that I'd be like, okay, that's Galadriel doing something that shows she's powerful in a way that's not the way Legolas is powerful, you know? Like it's like Galadriel and Legolas I didn't think were equivalents in like the live action interpretations of this character, so it kind of reads like if you're going to make Galadriel a like swordsman badass, like an elven warrior, it's like, why Galadriel? And I just feel like the reason is like, well, because Cate Blanchett's in the movie. And it's like,
yeah, no, I agree. They're using Elrond and Galadriel, and I actually think I think that's cool. I love those characters. And
see, but I think though you could have so much more leeway if you're either just using like characters that haven't been explored as much, or if you're gonna create like 20 new original characters anyways.
Yeah, there's a lot of original.
Why just have the original characters be the leads? Like, because then at least you could be like, yeah, no, we're not telling a Tolkien story. We're telling a story in that universe, but we don't want to mess up any of his stuff. The story
of the Rings of Power and the fall of Numenor.
No, but what I mean is like, is that the Lord of the Rings TV show that you have to make though? If you're gonna have so many more people being so much more sensitive about that stuff, and ultimately it's like, no, we want a Middle Earth TV show. Like that's really it. We just want we want a fantasy show that can be high budget and really flashy, and it'll be set in a universe that people already have a concept of. Like I ultimately think that's what this show is. Yeah. And I just think that like there's ways that you could lean into that and still make something that's pretty good. And it might still anger some Tolkien fans, and there's enough like key jangles or like kind of Easter eggs that you can throw in there that will make a lot of them happy if they can do things like playing Shadow of Mordor for me. I mean, I know that it's not really canon with the movies, it's not really canon from the books. It's a pretty fun video game though. Not a masterpiece, but there's some interesting elements there, and I can kind of enjoy it for what it is as its own thing.
Yeah, but see, that's kind of how I'm treating this show, to be honest. And that's also how I don't know. I see myself as being pretty consistent about this. I'm the same way. A lot of people are this way with God of War. I mean, there's really no hardcore accurate Norse mythology going on in that game.
Or Greek mythology for that.
Greek, I mean, Greek mythology or the Norse was the major one and the new one, I think. But, these are like kind of normie, create more like people doing their own thing with mythology. And Tolkien explicitly talks about this often. He wanted to create a modern mythology. This is not a fantasy story. This is a mythology, and I mean, you could call him the godfather of fantasy if that's what you want, but to lump him in the same category as like George R.R. Martin, That's just
Yeah,
disingenuous.
I don't think I
Yeah.
would at all. I mean, like the
Yeah.
complexity of like the Elven language is alone kind of is
Well, that's what started the whole thing, because what he did is that he invented the Elven language, and then he felt that it wasn't real unless it had a history. So his perception of language was that language language has history, like you can
yeah.
trace it back to its roots, and that's what makes it poetic and things like that. So he wanted to create the history of the elves, and that was like one of the reasons why he started writing his legendarium. So it is a mythology, and that's kind of so when I say that I'm okay with loose adaptations, like um I'm I'm also talking about um I'm also talking from the context of this being a mythology that has its own canon that can never be altered, right? Um if you're going to tell a game about Mordor with orcs, that's cool with me. If you're going to tell the Second Age in a way that like kind of didn't really happen, but it touches on the big arcs,
Mhm.
but just personally, like it doesn't, like I can't pretend to like be hurt by that. Like that's just where I don't know how, it's hard to describe to people who
Yeah,
are
like
like legitimately like
I think
poisoned by it, but
I'm
I don't
inclined to agree. My disagreement with
yeah.
how especially a lot of the people like on the production end, not even the production end, sorry, on the marketing end, who are promoting the show speak of this as if it's like no, this isn't just our own thing. This is a new Tolkien work, basically. Like
Yeah.
we're telling the story that he didn't tell. It's like, don't say shit like that. Don't. Like
Yeah,
unless you're really going to be like autistic about holding to it, don't put yourself in that position. Like
yeah,
I
the
don't know why
marketing
they're
is
not just like,
terrible.
yeah, no, like this is we have the license for Middle Earth. We've got some cool stories to tell. This is basically like our fan fiction. We love this universe, and we wanna tell some stories using it as a basis for mythology, kind of the way you were just explaining it to me. I
Yeah.
think a lot more people would be either, if not cool with it, much more okay with being like, okay, well,
Oh, dude, if I
I
was
can only
running
get so mad at this if like
if
that's what they're kind of saying
yeah,
it is,
if
you
I
know?
was running their PR team, I wouldn't have. First of all, I don't know if these actors have some sort of clause that allows them to like escape. Like, if I was the producer, the director, the showrunner, I probably wouldn't let some of these actors even speak, because I
Yeah,
wouldn't have
no,
hired
that
them in
would
the
be a
first
much
place
better
because
idea.
they're woke activists, and you can probably tell that before the casting call. Like, you don't. You probably just read that on their bio. Like, if it has she her on it, just don't fucking hire that person.
Well,
Because
or I mean, like
no, it
hire
doesn't
them, but then
bother
just
me.
be like, hey, just so you know, like
No, no,
we're Amazon and we're spending $50 million an episode. Don't go
yeah.
on Twitter until after the
Well,
Emmys.
that's why
Okay.
I think that they're protected somehow, because it doesn't, and all the shit that they've spewed, all the actors like bullshit with their political agenda, absolute, like that goes in one ear and out the other for me. I just want to watch the show, because guess what? Those actors, they didn't write the show. They are inserting their own political agenda into their characters, which were already written, okay, before like these people were even cast. So what they're doing is kind of essentially just ruining the hype for the show, which is a terrible thing. They shouldn't be allowed on tour, and the whole marketing is a disaster. Now, I just don't think it has anything to do with the show, and we can talk about whether or not you think agenda has infected the show, but I don't think it does.
I mean, I don't think that, to me, whether it has or not, I don't think it affects my opinion of the show, because honestly, like my entire dislike for it, which I almost think like my lack of fresh and very detailed knowledge of Tolkien's works puts me in an interesting position where it's like, no, like I'm totally ready for, if this is just a good show, that it, like, its biggest problem is it
Right.
fucks with canon in some ways that sort of suck. I'm like,
Well, House
I
of
don't know. I
Dragon,
think,
right?
well, I mean, sure, yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. I'm really enjoying House of the Dragon.
That's what I mean. But the marketing was terrible, right?
Yeah, and I mean that it does the I think the things that's bothering me the most is it seems like Miguel Sapochnik, I think, actually just said that he's not coming back as showrunner for season 2.
Yeah, it's
But
not a problem.
doing stuff like after the premiere of your HBO show that like flat out needs to work from like a financial standpoint. Like the difference between in value for HBO as a property with a Game of Thrones, like a Song of Ice and Fire universe show on the air killing it, and one that has 3 episodes that a few people watch and then it totally dies on the vine, is like not insignificant. Like they can't pull the Kevin Smith like, oh yeah, Netflix says it's totally fine, like no one watches the show, it doesn't really matter, like we've got 5 billion subscribers or whatever that famous Kevin Smith quote was. You know, like it's not really that kind of deal with shows of that scale. Like this isn't an animated He-Man show, it's Song of Ice and Fire. So I think that it is crazy when you have that, I guess, spoilers for episode 1 of House of the Dragon, everybody. When you have that, the C-section scene, and it works really, really well in the show. It doesn't seem like it's trying to make any real world political parallels. And if it is, they're not obvious, which means, guess what? That means you did them well. Because if you can watch the show and not be thinking, oh, this is the Roe v. Wade moment, like then, but that's what they were intending, then cool, they did that subtly enough that they weren't throwing it in people's faces. So when you have the showrunner be like, yeah, we really felt that it was important that we said something about Roe v. Wade in this Song of Ice and Fire show, and it's like, wait, like that wasn't really in the show, clearly. Like you didn't have to say that, and now you've politicized your fantasy show. Like, why? I mean, like, whatever anyone's thoughts are on Roe v. Wade is, I'm not making a judgment on it one way or the other. But like, why go there when you don't need to? Like, I see a million ways it can hurt, and not really any way it can help, I guess is probably the way I look at it.
Yeah, I just want, what would add to that, I totally understand it, but you should always try your best to separate what they're saying from the actual content of the show.
Yeah, I know, and
because
I do.
It's not
and
Roe
like,
v. Wade. There's nothing Roe v. Wade.
I know, and that's kind of my point. It's like, dude, you really did not have to say that. You just made your show polarizing for no reason. When I think most people who enjoy compelling television, seeing this king who's sort of going through some changes as far as like his sense of self-worth, and his search for an heir is not going well, and he has this male child that's being born, and the decision is, hey, you either they both die or we cut this baby out of your wife and maybe the baby lives. So like that is not at all a comparable like pro-choice, pro-life situation in the modern sense of the term. It's completely a medieval fantasy world problem, and it's really, really interesting to watch because you're like, oh my god, like there's not really a better choice he could be making here when you think about it. It's like they do it in a way that's like, man, this guy is really in a rock and a hard place, and it's interesting to watch. You feel sorry for the wife, obviously the mother. You feel sorry for the husband, and at the same time, it's like a horrifying torture scene at the same time. So it's working on a lot of levels. And to then be like, oh yeah, and that was a thing that if you liked it, guess what? You should vote this way in the next election. It's like, why bring that up? Like, all you were going to do is alienate some of your audience.
Yeah. But, I think we agree on a lot of that. I would like to talk about the show, like the actual quality of the show, just from a content perspective, from just as like, you know, does this work as a show? Does it work
I mean, and I'm more than willing to talk to you about that stuff. As I said, like when seeing you go to war for things on with your hot takes, my only thing with you is like, I was like, here's my thoughts. We will likely disagree, but I'll explain them to you. And disagree. I'm not going to call you Lefty Pixels or fanboy or anything like that.
No, all that stuff doesn't bother me. I shrug most of it off.
I know. I would not unironically go after you in that fashion. Yeah. It's just not really not my temperament.
I think we disagree though on the let's talk about the production quality, because I think that's
so I will say this. I think there are a lot of moments in episode 2 that look a lot better than episode 1.
Okay.
So like I the very least going there. Where honestly my biggest problem, if you really wanted me to get in the meat of what I disliked about it, was the sorry, I just knocked my mic. the direction, the editing, the fight scene choreography, the color grading, and the way the way the show looks like it has been color corrected and stuff in post looks to me like, again, like much closer to that CW show tier of like these characters don't look like they're part of the background, which is interesting because if you isolate the foreground and the sets that are built from the background that are like very scenic shots of New Zealand, because I think this season is shot in New Zealand, even though they're moving for season 2, I believe.
Yeah.
And those shots look incredible, but I find that just the quality of the sets actually, it's an interesting thing that it reminds me of. It sort of reminds me of what the live action scenes felt like watching The Hobbit in 48 frames a second. I don't know if you ever did that, like in the theater. Yeah, so I found that the way, I mean, me defending a high frame rate is going to be just the most typical thing ever. But where I think that format succeeds is with computer animated characters. So Smaug in particular in Desolation of Smaug, the second one, looked like a real thing in the theater when it was in like the higher frame rate mode. And I think the reason is that for cinema to work, like cinema of live action cinema of humans and real structures, there's an element of uncanny valley if it's at that high frame rate, and that's when things start to look like a reality show. But it's almost like we need that level of abstraction to buy that this is like a movie, or not necessarily buy it, but to like think it looks good as a cinematic work. Whereas my theory has always been with video games and with computer animated films and television. And I think that honestly, if Pixar movies all started releasing at 4K 60 FPS, they would look insane. Because I think that because computer animation has that level of abstraction already, when you amp up the frame rate, it makes the motion seem much more real. And because that motion is fake, and or it's captured, maybe it's not like real people, it just brings it closer to reality to my eyes, at least. But when you see live action characters and physical practical sets at that frame rate, it makes everything look like a stage play. And it really kind of pulls you out of it. And I think that the way the foreground sets and background and as well as the characters all mesh in at least the first episode of Rings of Power in particular just really seemed to me like as abnormal as watching the live action sets in The Hobbit at 48 frames. Like there's something about it that just seems off. And that's not the case in House of the Dragon. And for like, because like tons of people, I guess, especially when you have a negative opinion of big thing, it's like, oh, you were going in ready to hate it. I was going in ready to hate House of the Dragon because I really got burned by Game of Thrones season 8, and then I watched the first episode. I was like, fuck, it's pretty good.
People were going in ready to hate Prey too, which a lot of people
and I also liked Prey. I'm on team. Prey is a decent movie. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but Regs gave it a 6 out of 10 in his review, but argued it as like an actual 6 out of 10, not an IGN 6. Right. And I pretty much entirely agree with that. I think it's safe to call Prey an above average movie.
Yeah, I probably would say 6
with
or
5
7.
being average, I'd say like 6 or 7. I think is. But here's a question about Prey. Have you watched the Comanche dub?
No.
I strongly recommend it. No, I'm actually super serious because they do a good job of syncing the dub in a way that's not super distracting, and the characters no longer sound like teenagers from California. they sound like Comanche tribesmen, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. And apparently the original plan that Dan Trachtenberg had, the director, was to film it in Comanche. Like, and it's actually, the dubs are the actors playing the characters, like that are reading the lines in Comanche.
My only issue would be the syncing of the lines to the face.
And honestly, they do as good a job of it as you can, and I think a lot of it's helped out by the fact that there's really not a ton of dialogue in the movie to begin with.
Right.
But apparently though the original plan was to shoot it in Comanche, and when Fox bought Disney, or Disney bought Fox, they were like, yeah, no, that's not happening. Like, we need to make money on this movie, and then they put it on Hulu anyways.
Yeah,
it's would have been a lot better if it was in Comanche. I'm telling you.
Yeah, so I honestly, I understand what you're saying about The Hobbit and frame rates, and I kind of get where you're coming from. But I don't know how this connects to the show, so I'm trying to figure out episode
Well,
one.
because I think that that Rings of Power looks as abnormal as
I would
Hobbit
like
and 40 and
an example, because I honestly I can't. I don't know what you're talking about. Like
honestly, I could pick almost any shot from the show, but I think where it's most evident is when they get to the Harfoot's village.
The Harfoot's village. Okay.
Yeah, like it just everything there just seems weird. It doesn't seem to be like a place that actually exists the way the Shire did in the Lord of the Rings movies. And
Really?
I mean, again, as much as I've had people make the argument, it's like, yeah, well, those were like big budget, like huge movies. I'm like, each one of these episodes is a $50 million movie, and they have a lot of shared sets and props. So it's not like it's $50 million in isolation for every episode. It's like there's a lot of shared costs between them. So when you still have the average budget being $50 million per episode, I don't think you can make the argument that a movie from 20 years ago obviously looks better. Like, it's like, well, if anything, they should look comparable, I think. But I think that a lot of it is just due to like choices they were made about which things to do in CGI, which things to shoot practically, where to spend a lot of time on a specific set.
Yeah, I don't think there was any CGI in the Harfoot village. Are you talking
not necessarily, but I mean,
okay.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, yes, green screen compositing, like
because they did that with the Shire, right? They had a couple shots where matte painted extended Shire shots.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine to do that, but only if I don't notice it. You know, like that to me is the difference between really good special effects and like, example, okay, that's clearly composited, you know?
For example, I just rewatched in 4K, the extended edition, Lord of the Rings. A lot of the green screen is very noticeable, especially in Rivendell.
Okay.
It looks beautiful,
I think I can agree with you there.
Very, very
Rivendell definitely is one of the most movie set looking places in the movie.
Yeah. Now that to me is more of an aesthetic that I actually think is cool. I don't care if it's like, I don't need like, you've seen Dune, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's like the recent, a good example of a recent, like the most recent hyper perfection melding of green screen, CGI, and practical effects. It's very difficult to tell what's a set, what's green screen. That's like the peak, right? I honestly think Rings of Power is close to that peak. I don't think it's as good as Dune, but I honestly don't know how. I don't know. Honestly, don't know how they could be doing this any better than what they are. Like to me, the shots of Linden are very similar to the Rivendell shots. The shots of Eregion. I mean, we have one shot inside. We have a landscape shot from the sky view of Eregion. I think it looks fantastic. Like, I'm really struggling to to connect with what you're saying, because I can't think of an example that I go, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, again, I think it's less in things like the detail of the models, and I think it likely has a lot more to do with the way things are lit, with the way things are framed, with the way they're processed in post. Like all of it seems very. This was done for network TV, not this should be competitive with a movie.
Except I've read the opposite. I mean, personally, I think the opposite. A lot of people are saying this is up there with Dune, basically.
Yeah, no, I know. I've read a fair amount of people who say that this show looks incredible too, and I don't know what they're thinking. I'm just like, are we watching this? I was like, just watch an episode of House of the Dragon and then watch this and tell me that it looks better.
It has a very monotone color grading, right?
Yeah, but monotone. I mean that, and it's a lot easier to get away with that. Like, I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's like, well, I don't like, just because something's a lot more colorful and you could say interesting looking, like that doesn't necessarily mean it looks more convincing. I think those are sort of two different questions.
Okay, but I like House of Cards. I don't think every single fantasy show ever should be the same exact color grading, boring, monotonous, monotone colors.
I mean, that's true, but I mean, I think though that
out as a more, I'll just finish my thought quick.
Okay, sorry.
I'm totally fine with Rings of Power standing out as a as it does have its own visual style. I mean, you could kind of compare it to the Rings trilogy, but if you just watch the episodes on a 4K monitor, or TV or monitor, it has its own visual style. It looks beautiful. I like that about the show. I think it's one of the better qualities of the show. It's better than I would say it's the writing might be one of the poor qualities about the show, but I don't think I just don't think we're going to come to an unless you can like
we don't
necessarily we can go over screenshots and stuff. I don't see.
I also think that when it comes to rating aesthetics, like some of it might be down to taste also. Yeah. And I mean, like I don't know, it's difficult to objectively state whether something looks better than something else when you're talking about artistic products of the same type and scale. So like, I mean, that's kind of why I said that like House of the Dragon, as much as they don't look the same, it's sort of, I mean, obviously like in no small part of the fact that they're coming out the same year at basically the same time. There are reasons to compare them. And I just think that I have not been really pulled out of House of the Dragon. Maybe a couple shots of the dragons were like a little wonky. But I mean, really, realistically, I thought it all looked reasonable at the very least. Whereas there's tons of Rings of Power where I'm just like, this looks like a soundstage. Like I can't help but think that it's very obvious to me that they are on a movie set right now. Well, as opposed to like
I kind of know. No, once again, I kind of know what you're talking about, right? Especially with the scene where she was at the her brother's. When they carved the people in the trees. I think that was Lyndon, right? She was looking at her brother, like the visage of him carved into a tree. And then there was like Luthien and all these other characters that are like hyper lore fixated, like nobody knows about in the other trees. All of that to me looked like a set. And they obviously had like an extended green screen behind to make it look like it went way back in the distance. But guess what? That is there are probably hundreds of shots in the Lord of the Rings trilogy that had the exact same quality and feel. And you feel like you're on a set. If you go to any of the Minas Tirith scenes in the Return of the King, it looks like a set. And it like,
yeah, and some of the ultra wides
around the corner, right? You could tell that around the corner that there's nothing back there. Then they have green screen, or you could tell it's a miniature, right? So when I say that I think Lord of the Rings is like a perfect film, a 10 out of 10, I'm also noticing the sets, and I think it's like part of the charm. It's like part of the unique quality of the show, and I think they're trying to emulate that a little bit with the show, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. So I don't know. That's just where I'm coming.
Well, I mean, again, I think that that's probably just like an agree to disagree kind of point, because I don't know how I would convince you to view the aesthetics the same way I do, other than like trying to explain to you how I see them. But I mean, you don't obviously you don't have to agree. Like, I mean,
I think we could if we were like together. If we had like if we were watching it together, I mean, we could pause it. You could be like, hey, look, this is what I think about this shot or this sequence. This could have done better. Maybe that would work, but we're just
Well, I mean, I was just noticing even things like just timing and the edits and just the framing of shots and just everything about it just seemed. I don't know, like I mean, again, I don't. It'll sound pompous if I say amateurish, but like I just kind of feel like, was this the best shot you had of this? Was that the best edit you could have done? Like, I'm like, $50 million? Like, I mean, I guess a big part of it is knowing that this is like the most expensive thing that's ever been created. I'm like, this is what you guys got. Like, it looks marginally better than one of the Star Wars shows, I think. And like, I think like other than season 1 of Mandalorian, where it had that volume CGI aesthetic, but I mean, it was still kind of new and it wasn't seeming as samey because we didn't have 5 shows set on Tatooine at that point. Like, I mean, I think that I would probably put it at about tied with the Star Wars Disney Plus shows.
But once again,
maybe not as good as the Marvel ones, which I also don't think look very good.
Well, like, I think the worst part, I think the Star Wars shows, that is the least problematic thing about those shows.
Oh yeah, I would say that. If
they had a fantastic story and a writing, they actually look fine. You know what I mean? They look pretty good, especially for using whatever that dome technology.
Obi-Wan had some rough stuff in it. like I mean, again, I think there's another thing. I'm kind of stealing this thought from Rags. The watching Prey not too long after Obi-Wan. It's like Obi-Wan, I think, made me watching Prey after Obi-Wan made me appreciate how good it looks when you film a forest by filming in a forest. It's like, well, it actually really does make a big difference when you're not on a soundstage that has some little trees scattered about and have
which is
grown-ass adults pretending to be outrun by a 10-year-old who looks 6.
And I think Rings of Power, I think they're doing as much as they can with landscapes in the New Zealand landscape. I think they're doing as much as they can. Of course, they're going to have soundstage stuff, but because you can't just go into a forest every time you want to shoot a scene, or you can't just build a forest that looks like Linden, right? You just can't do it.
But I mean, you could do things like, the Moria sets, I think, would probably be the better example, ones that are tough. But I think you can make your shoot schedule so that all the scenes that are done in the forest are done within the same month, and that's just the month that you guys are shooting out in that forest location. I mean, it's tough to do, but I think if it's like, well, does it have to be a forest then, or can we pick a location that looks better for us to shoot on our sound stages? Like, I think that all those decisions, I don't pretend like, well, they obviously they had to be in this forest where it would look like this. I'm like, I don't know, man. There's a lot of decisions you can make that can make the shots that you have look better, or even just set yourself up so that you're going to get shots that look good to begin with. You know, like it's like, okay, well, if the show's written in a way where we know we can actually pull it off, that might be better than writing it in the ideal way that it could possibly be on paper. Because, I mean, it was easy to think that if you're the writer, it's like, well, I'm going to shoot for the moon and write, I'm not going to hold anything back. I'm going to try to make this the best show I can possibly make it. It's like, well,
you can't do that. But, you can't hold back with Lord of the Rings.
I mean, sure. But I mean, at the same time, if it's like, well, maybe we should have a better idea of how we're planning to shoot this. How, like, say, which cameras are we using? What types of scenarios do these cameras function most effectively in? Oh my God, did you hear X-Ray Girl?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I guess she's playing Resident Evil. That's what my guess is. She's playing Resident Evil 2 for the first time, and I've gotten her whole chat to promise they won't tell her about Mr. X. So yeah. My wife might have a heart attack sometime within the next month. But
what did you think of Jay Bayonna's directing?
I do not think it was very good at all. And when I found out he was the guy who directed Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, it made perfect sense to me.
Okay, have you seen A Monster's Call, The Impossible, or The Orphanage by any chance?
I have not, but I have seen Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, and I did not like it.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because those are his baby films. Like, those are his. You can see his handprint, his artistry in those 3 films. A Monster's Call, The Orphanage, and what was the other? The Impossible, which is about the Indonesian tsunami with Ewan McGregor. Fantastic movies. The problem with Fallen Kingdom was not Jay Bayonna. The problem with that was the script was terrible.
Yeah, although
he was brought in to direct that, right? Colin Trevorrow did the first one, I believe the third one. But I honestly think the best parts of that movie were stuff that he did with, like, the Indoraptor. I honestly think that was, like, some of the most iconic parts of the movie. It was Jay Bayonna's directing. The worst parts of the film were the script, the acting, the pacing, the story, which, you know, he came in after that stuff was all kind of, and, you know, this is a trip.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I guess there was still nothing in Rings of Power that impressed me from a direction or I mean, even like any kind of direction, if you want to talk about setting up shots or like working with actors.
What about the stranger falling the meteorite sequence
at the very end of the first episode?
No, the beginning of the second episode.
Oh, yeah, it was okay.
I think that was pretty creatively shot and filmed, especially with the sound design when it sucked. Okay, when he sucked the fire up, and there was about 3-second like hairpin silent, 3 heartbeat sequence, and then it just exploded back into like the fire again. If you watch it and like just maybe like don't give a fuck about everything else and like just kind of pay attention to that sequence, I think it's really, really well done. And there's a lot of
maybe I'll give it a second look.
I think there's a lot of like drips like that throughout all the episodes. He was constrained with like the Game of Thrones like back and forth shit, which makes the show feel like the pacing is bad, even though it's so
well, I mean, that was actually that was one thing I was going to bring up, that I think the Moria stuff in the second episode was so much more interesting, and like the performances for the most part were so much better that I'm like, I kind of think this show would be a lot stronger if we weren't constantly cutting to 5 different people who like don't really seem to have a whole lot to do with each other. I mean, they might obviously, like, I mean, we're 2 episodes in, but it just, the show seems like it's a lot more scattered than it maybe needs to be. Like, again, I think that a big part of the problem was the desire to do super epic, large scale Lord of the Rings show as your first attempt to make a Lord of the Rings show. Like, I almost think that maybe it would have been better if you did like a little 4-episode miniseries of just, hey, here's this thing that happens. Here's the story of the fall of Moria, and just do that, and just have it be in the mountain the entire time. Like, or like, you know, have some exteriors and stuff. But I just think that, like, it feels to me like the safer bet would have been to do stuff like that than to create, you know, like an almost $1 billion show.
Do you think that your thoughts on that might change if, for example, if, let's say, half the characters at some point throughout this show cross paths, and then suddenly we don't have 6 storylines, we have like 3 now. And I mean, it becomes way more like consistent. You know what I mean?
If they're done in a way where it is interesting and it's like it comes together, and not just like, oh, okay, now we've got to teleport across Middle Earth again so that these characters can meet up. And oh, by the way, did you meet this elf that has like shaved head? he's gonna be a big part of this whole thing too. By the way, he's dating a white woman. She's human, and people disapprove of it. Wow.
So yeah, now
that's what you did with that, eh?
Another thing is,
I thought Gary was kidding when he was saying guess who's coming to 11sies, but like that's actually the story they're doing.
Oh yeah, I guess. I was just thinking.
Or guess who's coming to second breakfast?
11sies.
Afternoon tea.
What I do hear a lot of comparisons to how the Lord of the Rings pacing versus the Rings of Power pacing. I just want to say one thing. I think it's Lord of the Rings has perfect pacing because it's a perfect novel, and it's also a very slow but gripping like long form adventure.
Yeah.
What the difference is, obviously, 9 hours versus 50 hours, right? So I personally I think everybody should be doing this, but I think we're supposed to suspend our urgency for like immediate, like kind of dramatic build up to some sort of battle or something within the first 2 hours. It's probably should be more like an 8-hour thing. You know what I mean? If you're doing the math,
I mean, I can agree with that. I don't think I would dispute that. There's a possibility that this is going somewhere more interesting than I'm giving it credit for.
Well, I think I think it definitely is, right? We're going to do the forging of the Rings of Power, and we're going to do the Last Alliance, right? Like that is objectively like the most interesting, I guess subjectively, but it's one of the most interesting parts of the entire Tolkien legendarium. So we already know that it's going somewhere fascinating. I'm really curious why people are kind of willing to just pretend that they don't know that, you know. Like,
well, I mean, like as someone who's not super like knowledgeable in the Second Age, I guess like I don't know that, but I think that more.
But they showed that in the trilogy, right? They showed that in the prologue.
I mean, yeah, but like I don't know how much exactly the show is going to cover, you know. Like and also I think that it would be. I actually think it would be more unfair to the show if I was just counting the days until Isildur's, you know, cutting the fingers off Sauron. You know, like, I mean, I think that kind of like, I mean, if anything, the way I was able to connect with Better Call Saul was when I stopped kind of like when I got enough episodes in that I'm just like, oh, this isn't just the Breaking Bad prequel. Like, this is a character study of Jimmy McGill, aka Saul Goodman, and it's way more interesting than you think it's going to be. Like,
people didn't like it at first. A lot of people.
I know, I didn't. I mean, like in my, as much as I think it's like after that last episode, I was like that all-time great TV show. I think is, or like I mean, I think I can make the argument at the very least, even if. I think I don't know. I think I might lose the argument to someone who's like, yeah, no, Breaking Bad's better. Because I'm not sure.
Sure.
I'm not sure which side I would even take in that argument. But at the very least, I see a strong case for Better Call Saul. Especially like, I mean, man, like with just saying one line that I guess is a spoiler if you know it, but you won't understand the context if you haven't seen it. The you had him down to 7 years is like the best thing ever. Like I was like, oh my god, that's good.
So somebody in the chat said, I'm not sure what they're answering. Maybe something I said, but he said, Keysward says, because I don't trust corporations, why would I blindly trust any of these companies?
Well, I mean,
can
like
it be
then
good? Sure. Will it be good? Statistically unlikely.
I mean, I don't know that I would be that doomerish about it. Like, I mean, because again, like Amazon has done some pretty decent stuff in the last little bit. I mean, granted, it's one that is kind of the opposite, where like the mainstream critics were saying it was the worst thing that ever happened, and most people who actually watch it are like, it's really great. But Terminal List with Chris Pratt is awesome. Like, I thought it was incredible. Way better than I thought it was going to be as well, because all I knew about it going in was, oh, this is the Chris Pratt Navy SEAL show. And I'm like, okay. So it's probably going to be, I don't know, like 24 or something. But I was like, holy shit, I didn't expect this to be what's basically a cross between The Fugitive and The Punisher.
It's a great show. And a lot of people were saying it's boring, and I don't understand.
Oh, I don't agree with that at all. Because I thought one thing that made Terminal List actually quite incredible was that every episode was like its own little movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like they did a really good job of making a very serialized show in which every episode takes place exactly where the last one ends, but it almost kind of feels like they're episodic in a way that is, I think, difficult to do. And actually, it's funny that I sort of assumed that Terminal List would be more like 24 because I'm going to compare it to it. But the only show I've ever really seen do that as well, whereas like hit that middle ground between episodic and serialized storytelling, is the 5th season of 24. The one with where Peter Weller's the bad guy. I mean, I guess spoilers because he's not the bad guy at first. Man, I'm terrible. This is why I started putting spoiler warnings in my video game reviews, because a lot of people would come to my channel and be like, hey, you kind of spoiled this whole game. I'm like, well, the game came out like 5 years ago, like whatever. Yeah. But I get some people are more sensitive to it. But I apologize if I spoiled season 5 of 24 for anyone, because that's the one worth watching.
That's 1, 2, 5.
1, 2, 5.
Yeah,
those are the ones you need to watch. Maybe 4. 4 is okay. Show Ray Ashtaglu is.
I understand. Awesome. I do understand why people are skeptical of Amazon. Like I especially have on a like precious property, like Tolkien. My hesitation with giving any kind of I always push back against the argument, well, it's Amazon, well, it's Netflix, well, it's Disney Plus.
Yeah, because they've all done good stuff.
They've all done. So. Now, Disney Plus is actually very formulaic and predictable. Yeah. So
their originals
is
are horrible.
The opposite of predictable, right? They have Arcane, they have Midnight Mass, they have Dark, they have Peaky Blinders, they have a fuck ton of Korean dramas that are incredible.
Oh yeah.
But then they also
All
have
of Us Are Dead
really
is like the greatest zombie show.
All of Us Are Dead is phenomenal. Hellbound is really good. Squid Game is great. A Sweet Home is really good, by the way.
Yeah, I saw Sweet Home too.
But then, so I could probably list another 10, 15 shows that are really good on Netflix.
Sweet Home is legitimately a better Resident Evil show than that new Resident Evil show.
I totally agree. 100%. Terrible CGI, but it's a really good show.
Yeah, and they overuse one Imagine Dragons song a lot.
Oh my God,
I think it's just because they had the rights to that song, so they use it pretty much anytime there's an epic moment, and it's like, I feel like So I feel like some non-licensed music in here would probably be better than hearing Imagine Dragons for the 15th time on this show. But I would still say the show is definitely worth watching.
I agree. Could we talk about the music for this show?
The music's good. I have no complaints about the music. Bear McCreary's great. Like, I mean, if you liked the God of War 2018 soundtrack and Battlestar Galactica, it's him being that good. Like, I think that it would be a little dishonest for people to say, "Oh, Rings of Power sucks because it has terrible music." I'd be like, "Well,
heard that quite a bit on."
I mean, like, honestly, really, like the music is the thing you're gonna go after. I mean, I have so many problems with the show that have nothing at all to do with music.
I know, dude. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a bit more controversial and like antagonistic with people, because I do have this feeling that some people, not everybody, but some people they're just being disingenuous about the show because they hate they hate what it's done to Tolkien. I think that it's undeniable that there are some people that are doing that. Especially, you notice it more when they're talking about the music and saying it's ass and like terrible music, horrible. If you look and just listen to the music, okay, this is what we've done for 20 years with the Lord of the Rings soundtrack. For the last 20 years, everybody has been absorbing that soundtrack for 20 years. Okay,
yeah.
If you watch one episode of Rings of Power without really paying attention to the music because you're paying attention to how bad the show is, and then you say the music sucks, like I'm trying to be less antagonistic on this stream, but like
I mean, you've like we're on the same side on the music. Yeah. I mean, part of that might just be because I know the composer and I like a lot of his other work, but at no point did music pull me out of any scene. And I think that for your first time watching a movie or a show, that's the job of the score. The job of the score is just to kind of enhance the emotional impact of what's happening in the scenes without pulling you out of it. And as much as I didn't have a lot of emotional impact for any of the scenes, I don't think I was thinking, if only the score was better. I was thinking, man, this show needs a lot of better writers and soon. And people either, and I mean, here's where I'll split the difference between the two people who could be at fault for the acting element is either better actors or directors that are better at directing those actors. Because I thought in the first episode, at least, I thought Celebrimbor was great, but he was in like 2 short scenes. So, but like he's sort of the only actor that was on the show that I was like, oh, this seems like a professional actor who got hired to do this job because he's good. Whereas everyone else, I'm just like, is this someone's cousin? like I'm just like, I don't believe that this was the best person to be in this role. And I mean, and that's also not me being like, there should not be black elves. Like I kind of, so beyond the point of like, honestly, I think I'm more bothered by the black elf's haircut than I am by him being black because
though.
I think it's very bad. I think Galadriel is horrible. And she delivers sort of every single line as if she's trying to give some kind of epic warning. And it I don't know. But
isn't that the purpose of her character?
I mean, is that all she is? I didn't feel like that's all she was in or I mean, I didn't think she was one note in. Yeah. Sure, but I mean, I didn't find Cate Blanchett's Galadriel to be one note at all. You know?
Really?
And like, I mean, no. She actually goes through a few things in like the short scene that she's in Fellowship of the Ring. I'm not rating her Hobbit appearance because I watched The Hobbit once each in theaters, and that was kind of it for me.
I think what you should do probably is at least give this actress a full season to have a character arc because you know what I mean. Like, but the other, all you're doing right now is you're watching like the first 10 minutes of her storyline, and then like you're judging her acting and based on her unfinished character arc, and you know what I mean, like.
Well, I mean, but like, really I don't think that they are directing that actress to be interesting. I think they're directing her to be very, very monotone, very single-minded. Which I don't even know if you could make the arguments like, well, but she's very concerned about the Sauron thing. It's like, yeah, but even like she's kind of narrating and saying that all these kind of events, at least in the first little bit, are taking place over the course of hundreds of years. So, I mean, does that mean she was just in intense warning mode for centuries? Like, I'm just like, I don't know, man. Something about that just seems kind of odd. Like this doesn't really work.
There is a weird thing about the show where there's clearly time skips that they don't explain.
I have a perfect thing that I can interject here, though, because I think it might affect Gandalf in Fellowship of the Ring. Because once he figures out what the ring is, he gets into ominous warning mode. But they gave us a little bit of him, being a dude with the hobbits. Like we got on board with like, oh, okay, this guy's like the happy old wizard dude that like comes and visits the tiny people in their village. So when he gets serious, it's like that has some weight. And I mean, I'm not saying that you have to do it exactly that way, but I'm saying that I don't necessarily think that the ominous warning character needs to also be boring. And I found not even necessarily the storyline of what's going on, because I mean clearly it's pretty intense when you break down just the elements of it. It's like, yeah, there's an ancient evil that is not, I guess you could say Morgoth would be the actual ancient evil, but there's a powerful adversary that's harnessing some very, very dark powers, and we've been chasing him down for centuries and we still haven't found him, and now people are starting to think he doesn't exist, and I'm like the only one that can find him. It's like, yeah, okay. Although at the same time, ancient evil that like no one believes exists is that is a storyline that we've seen a whole lot of. And I mean, part of that again might be my ignorance of second age stuff. Like if this is just how Galadriel's supposed to be in this era, fine, but yeah,
no, look,
I mean,
we can move on from Galadriel, because I talked about that for almost 3 hours last night. And
okay, fair. The other thing, I just don't think
saying.
I don't think she's very good in action scenes either, and they're making her do way too much action. Like, and that is like like maybe edit her action a little bit more specifically, because this actress really, maybe like, if you compare it to say like Henry Cavill in the first season of Witcher. Like, or the first episode of Witcher, even. It's like, wow, okay, this is a guy who's been in the gym swinging a sword around for months, or at least it looks like it. Whereas with her, it's like she probably got taught how to do this yesterday.
Yeah. So, I'm willing to kind of accept that I think she's probably the weakest character at this point. Now, could that change in 2 episodes?
I mean, maybe, yeah. Like, and again, I'm not saying anything definitive about the show. All I'm saying is, for sure, I absolutely hated the first episode, and I didn't like the second episode. But I would say that there's a distinction between me not liking something and me hating something that's not meaningless. So, like, I mean, I guess in that respect, like, I enjoyed most of the stuff that was happening in Moria, and I was like, oh, okay. I'm not crazy about the guy who plays Elrond, just because I don't know. I guess maybe because Hugo Weaving is so good as Elrond, this dude does not have anything that makes me think young Hugo Weaving, and I guess it's been kind of ambiguous as to whether this is like prequel to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings or if it's own thing. And,
it's not. That's another thing. I mean,
sure, if it's not, they have not made that clear.
Yes, they have. Like, yes, they have.
I mean,
they've made it super clear. It's very, very clear. This is
I don't know. I don't know that it's clear to anyone who's not like going into marketing materials and like really digging deep. Like, I think if you just see this on Amazon, you're absolutely gonna think that if Gollum, because you probably, really, if you're a normie, like,
right? That's your perception of the show, which is wrong. So I mean, whether or not they gave you the correct information or not has nothing to do with whether or not that character is good for this specific show. He's probably not good as an early Hugo Weaving, but that has nothing to do with the show because it's not a prequel to the film. So I just don't like that argument. I'm not going to entertain that argument. I think it's dumb, especially especially with what I think they're probably going to be doing with the Harfoots, which could end up destroying the whole show. Which if the Harfoots
making the spaceman Gandalf and having the Harfoots be the reason why he likes hobbits.
Like if this
that's what I thought. I mean, it seems like that's probably what they're implying because they had him talking to the Fireflies.
Yeah. So if
like the same way Gandalf like talks to the moss, which I think is praying to the sky god, the god of all the things that fly. And they sort of have a deal, and that was the thing with him talking to the reason he was able to talk to a moth in the movies. Remember this being actually explained to me by someone else.
Didn't do that in the books, but you're right.
Well, but the way it was explained to me in the as the reason this happens in the movies and it makes sense in the lore is because all the things in the world that fly are kind of they communicate via the same deity. And so that's kind of the reason why it at least makes sense in the lore to a degree that him talking to a moth allows him to be like, hey, yo, eagles, we need some help, bros.
Here's what's interesting, though. The animals in the Lord of the Rings canon have their own free will, which is... So what happens in the books is Radagast tells Gwaihir to go save Gandalf. Well, Radagast tells Gwaihir to go, the Great Eagle, to go to Isengard, where Gandalf is being held at the top of the tower. This is in the books, right? Radagast is not in the film. Gandalf talks to a moth in the film, and then the moth tells Gwaihir to come rescue him. It's just Radagast in the book, like playing the middleman.
Oh, okay.
And what happens is Gwaihir is an intelligent creature. It has its own, free will. Same thing with all the animals. It's interesting that the fireflies in this show, they all died, right? So they all they just died.
He talked to him and then he just kills them.
I think that's really interesting and like kind of cool. Like I like fireflies, like the whole concept, like the symbolism of the firefly. I think that whole storyline with the stranger is awesome as far as like setting up a mysterious character. My problem is if two things can't happen. The Harfoots cannot do anything significant that would put their race on the map of the history of Middle Earth, because by the time
they're not in the history books.
Well, like the whole point of why Bilbo's character is so fucking awesome is because he's the first Hobbit to do anything even remotely.
Well, I mean, I saw an interview where the guy did say like, well, we know that the hobbits didn't do anything significant since the first age, but there's not a lot written about the Harfoots, which is why we use Harfoots.
Bullshit. I was
like, well, okay, so obviously you guys are going to make them super significant then. Like, I would maybe have not said anything about that.
Here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping they kill those characters off.
Oh, I'd be pretty happy if that happened too, because if we're gonna talk about bad acting, like I like it really. I don't know, it that. It seemed to me like real high school play vibes. Like
I totally disagree. I thought she was really charming and funny.
I mean, the main one I guess is okay, but like everyone else in that village was like, "Oh, this is." That was actually the kind of what I was saying is like that's when I was like this must be people's nephews. Like, you know what it read to me similar to Anakin's friends in the Phantom Menace. That kind of like I don't believe that these were the best child actors you could find. I believe these are George Lucas's kid and their friends. Which, I mean, like, honestly, fair enough. Like, if you want to put your kid in your movie, that's cool. But like, I don't have to say it's great. I can say, yeah, but they didn't do a good job. So you probably shouldn't have done that. Like, I mean, you're well within your rights to do it, but
I hope
best idea, probably not.
Yeah, I just hope that either they kill them off, because two things would happen. That would be, the show is about death. Lord of the Rings is about death and mortality. That's like what the whole point of the mythology is about. So that would satisfy that theme. I think is the show has to pay attention to Tolkien's themes. If it does any deviations at all, they have to be within the context of the themes and the tone of the show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's fair. Yeah. It's like if you're gonna change storyline stuff, at least try to keep the intention of the morals and messages the same.
So if they let's say they kill the hobbits, right? Or let's say something happens where one of them dies, or prevents them from interacting with the elves or the dwarves or like the men in a significant way. That to me is like a cool way to introduce Harfoots, like an ancestor of the hobbits, because they did exist. It's just Tolkien didn't write anything about them. So I'm fine with that. And I also do think that I understand wanting to have these hobbits in the show. It makes sense.
Wanting to aesthetically have hobbits.
Yeah, like in terms of
but again, like that seems to be, I can't help but have the cynical reason of like, okay, it's so why are the Harfoots in it? Because I clapped when I saw the Harfoots.
Yeah, it's a little artificial, but but you do have that. No, it doesn't need to be, because the Second Age doesn't need any Harfoots. It should just be elves and dwarves and stuff. But it doesn't.
Well, no, but I mean that the reason they put it in there was because there was a producer who's like, all right, so well, what do we got for hobbits? It's like, oh, actually, there weren't any hobbits of doing significant things in the Second Age. What? Oh, we got to have the little people. My kids, they love dressing up as the hobbits. We got to have hobbits in there. Like, it seems to me that it was that guy like making those plans also, between lines of coke.
Also, I think that if this is Gandalf, another big problem. I think like Gary would agree with me if I were to like talk to somebody who's familiar with the lore about this. The problem with having Gandalf in the show is not that he was not in the Second. Everybody's like, oh, he wasn't in the Second Age. That, honestly, that's not the point.
Well, because isn't the age of wizards is kind of on the ambiguous side, isn't it? Like, because they're not humans in the sense that
maybe you're not aware of this. Tolkien contradicts himself multiple times.
Oh, okay. I know. I'm
with
definitely not
certain
aware
characters, not Gandalf necessarily, although possibly Saruman. But no, there's a contradiction between the Blue Wizards, for example. There's two different storylines. There's one storyline where they show up with Saruman in the Third Age and they go east. There's another one where they show up in the Second Age way earlier. So like that's an example to me. If this was a Blue Wizard, totally, I don't care. That's cool because actually Tolkien did write them in the Second Age. It may have contradicted what he wrote previously or after, but my point is Gandalf. The problem with Gandalf being in the show, I think, is that if you watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and if you've read the books, and if you know anything about Gandalf, he is suspicious of like the Hobbit, or he has this interesting relationship with hobbits where he has this intuition that there's something special about this race.
Yeah.
And that they have something important to do before the storybooks are finished. That intuition is like part of why Gandalf is such a charming character, because he's able to see some of this stuff when nobody else can. That's why he chooses Bilbo as his burglar. If you give Gandalf, okay, if you suddenly give Gandalf knowledge of hobbits that have been doing this crazy like adventuring and like in super important like significant things in the Second Age, it totally takes away from the dramatic kind of moment with that or of the Third Age where he's, you know, what I just described basically.
Yeah.
It's like it just takes all of that mystique away and it dulls it down. And so I hope that they handle it well. I don't know. It could go off the rails, but
yeah, I mean that's kind of the always the worry of adaptation of beloved properties. And again, I'm not going to say from Amazon because again, I don't. I think that all of these properties are much more down to like who the creatives they put in charge of it and how much freedom they give them than the companies themselves existing, with the possible exception of Lucasfilm, but I think that's only because Lucasfilm has had a pretty clean track record over the last, I guess, I don't know, has it been a decade? Well, not quite, maybe. The last at least 8 years or so of almost putting the worst possible people in charge of everything, with the odd glimmer of hope every now and then even those tend to disappoint, given the long lens of history.
Well, yeah, I think what I'm gonna do is, I don't know how much longer you want to stream.
It doesn't really matter to me. It's Labor Day weekend, so I don't have to work tomorrow. So.
Oh right, do I have to work? I don't know idea.
I don't know.
So. I'll ask.
One of those. Oh, I mean, I guess unless war breaks out, because I suppose I am a soldier, so I'm never totally off the clock. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I'm in Canada, so at least if I'm not on a high readiness team either. So if they say, "Hey, guess what? We're going to war with Russia. You need to report to like the base within the next 20 minutes," I'll be like, "Yeah, I'm high." So okay, I'm not gonna do that, but I'll go fight Russia tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly, dude. I mean, I would love to chat with you about various. I don't know how political you can get on stream, but like
I mean, I try to get not super political on stream, but at the same time I'm on Rumble right now, and like not a lot of people watch me here, so I probably do. It's just like as a member of the Canadian Forces or as like a Canadian soldier, I've got to watch what I say about political stuff, especially controversial political things, because it can be construed as like I can end up in the paper and it's like Canadian soldier makes statement about, I don't know, Caitlyn Jenner or whatever it would be. Like I was trying to pick someone who's like not super relevant right now, but that wasn't me taking a shot at Caitlyn Jenner. It was just I didn't want to say someone who people would actually be like, oh, is that an opinion? It's like no. The answer is no. But yeah. So the last thing I want is for the military to say, okay, you need to either voluntary release or stop doing any YouTube stuff. And because I think ultimately I'd probably be like, okay, I'm leaving the military, because like I get a lot of I find making videos and things like that very rewarding. Especially I don't know if you've seen my Metroid video, but holy hell is it blowing up relative to my channel.
Oh, nice.
Like, dude, I have 4.6 thousand subscribers. I had like 3.8 before that video, and I have 61,000 views on it. I was like, holy shit. Wow. I was like, I should take more time on videos more often.
Yeah, find that you have to find that it takes a while because you have to do like average. You have to average your view count per video and stuff like over the course of like I don't know, half a year.
Mhm.
I figured out a formula, and I just hit my Homelander short that I made yesterday, a couple days ago. It was Homelander reacting to She-Hulk. It's on my it's on my YouTube channel. It's the second video. It has
Nice.
170,000 views, dude.
Holy shit!
I only have 6,000 subs. So,
did you get it monetized, or is because it's boys footage did it get claimed?
I can't be monetized.
Oh shit! That sucks.
No, but it's helping me get there. I mean,
Oh, you mean you just haven't hit the criteria for monetization?
I have not hit the criteria.
Oh, really? Oh man, that's you see. I'd figure with you being on Flashcast as often as you were, at least that community would like help you get above 1,000 subs and throw some of your playlists on loop. Like I mean, Geeks and Gamers certainly helped me with that. And I don't mean the company. I mean the viewers. Like no, they're like, oh yeah, we'll help you out, whatever. And it's like, okay, cool, thank you.
I think I probably should have been doing better marketing for my channel, but
I mean, realistically, you get your friends and family to just like make a stream playlist, like your videos that are like 3 hours long, and just be like, before you go to work, just throw my playlist on loop. It'll get you some hours.
I want to do more of this stuff because it's such a long view.
Yeah, and exactly, and then you realize quickly that doing longer form streams. It might not be your bread and butter for your content, or it might, but even if it's not, it's still really good for getting to those watch hours. And I always think it's kind of stupid that you can't just make money on YouTube like right away, because I mean
4,000 is a hell of a long period of time.
Yeah, well, and getting above 1,000 subs, be like, hey, well, but if you've got 500 subs and they all watch your videos every day, like I mean. Should you not maybe like get some of the money? I mean, that's not a very common occurrence, but it's like, well, YouTube, if you're making ad revenue off me, can I get some of that? Like, I'm the one making the content here.
Yeah, I think what I'm gonna do, maybe this is something you'd be interested in. I'm not running it, but I'm kind of involved now in this. I might be guest hosting or whatever occasionally. This stream about I guess about you like small YouTube content, small.
Oh yeah, I'd love
how to jump ahead of like the pack and like stand out, get views, get followers.
Yeah. I actually, for that, I'd probably be your best example of like things to not do. but at the same time though, this is the first time that one of my own videos has like really paid off for me, and I think part of it is because basically me in comparison to most of the other people that come out of like the sort of Geeks and Gamers camp is I'm just not really capable of making like 3 videos a day or like even 1 video a day realistically, which it doesn't like if you do the type of content that is well suited to that, which for the most part is, you watch a video or you read an article and you give your thoughts on it, and you do 4 or 5 of those a day, and they each get 100,000 views because you have a 30,000 subscriber channel, and like that's the best way to grind on YouTube and like actually make a living off it. I'm probably never going to make a living off YouTube, but I spent 10 months making a 2-hour documentary on the history of the Metroid franchise, and it's like my first video that's actually made money in ad revenue.
You know how crazy that is? I'll tell you how crazy that is. I put, how many hours did you say?
Did I take to make it, or how many hours is the video?
To edit, write the video, or whatever.
Oh, like it took me like the better part of a year.
Never mind.
But I played 12 games, and some of them multiple times. Like Metroid Dread, I played 5 times. I played Metroid Prime 2 twice. Metroid Samus Returns 3 times, and some of this was just because of like losing footage and things like that, because it took so long to actually get it all together. And also, I wanted to write and redraft the hell out of my script and make sure I was really confident on all my things. And lucky. So basically.
No.
Lucky in a
you got the perfect storm, which is you spent a long time on a video and it paid off. What I'm trying to say is I've done that before and it has not paid off.
Oh yeah, no, so have I. Like, I mean, my Last of Us Days Gone one didn't take nearly as long to make, but I also part of the reason the Metroid one took as long as it did is because as I was saying, I'm an army medic, and I got loaded onto a medic course, so basically to like expand my scope of practice and do a whole bunch of cool skills that I wasn't qualified to do before. So now I actually can cut a hole in your throat and shove a tube in there if your airway is been unsalvageable. Like if you have like maxillofacial trauma, so like your jaw's broken and you can't hold your airway, I can cut into your cricothyroid cartilage and put a tube in your throat. I hope I never have to do that to anyone ever, but technically I'm qualified to do that.
My brother has a trach. He has muscular dystrophy, so
well, I mean,
this every 3 weeks or so.
A tracheotomy is actually it's a bit of a different thing because a trach isn't a lot of people call a cricothyroidotomy a trach because it's just a colloquial term people know. But like a trach with an actual like ostomy that you have, sorry, not that you have, that your brother has, that is more of a permanent procedure. Whereas a cricothyroidotomy is an emergency medicine procedure that can be done in the field. So like it's basically like last resort minor surgery being performed by someone who is not a surgeon, because as much as I'm now qualified to do this skill and can legally do it in an operational environment, I'm still not a surgeon. So you're having a bad day if I'm the one cutting into your neck, but technically it's something that I am now qualified to do. But it was hard to focus on that level of academic material while also going all out with editing and recording and stuff like that on a video. So I basically just kind of took my time playing through the games while having enough time to study and properly learn the material, because I don't want to end up killing somebody someday.
Yeah. You're going to save a life. Don't worry.
I mean, I honestly, the high likelihood I'm never, ever going to have to use that skill. Most of the times, if I save lives, it's because someone came in and thought they had stomach flu. Turns out they had appendicitis, and I caught it and sent them to the hospital. So, and even then, it's like an ambiguous, might they have died? It's like, well, I mean, maybe. Like, if you're appendix experts and you go into septic shock, then you're going to have a bad time at the very least.
So, I do want to get back to Lord of the Rings, but just quickly, I wanted to say, I just wanted to finish, kind of wrap that conversation because I think it's interesting. I used to do long form video reviews, right? It took me about 10 hours or so to do video essays, I would say.
I watched your the Hello Games one.
Oh, okay. So that was
the Last Bonfire review. Is it the Last Bonfire?
Campfire.
Last Campfire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, if you guys
I watched it, and I remember telling you, I was like, yeah, your style is actually really similar to mine as far as how you edit your videos.
It was similar, and I think that was when we first met or something. But then I did a couple more of those, right? And I kind of got a little burnt out because I was getting 300-400 views on stuff that took me 10-12 hours to make. And then I was getting 6,000 views and stuff that took me 30, like a meme, right? So I kind of shifted my focus a little bit. Yeah. I definitely, when I'm monetized, want to get back to doing video essays. If you guys go back down, if you're interested, go back down to my channel. I did a Last Campfire video game review, and I did a couple video essays. They're 10, 15 minutes long. Feel free to leave comments. Let me know if you guys are interested in that stuff, and I might bring that back.
Yeah, no, Lofty, his video game review that I watched was quite good. I mean, I know I just said that it's very similar in style to the ones I make, which I suppose makes this compliment now sound sort of cocky.
Makes it better.
But yeah, I think if for the people here that are just watching for me or oh, we just want to see Lofty get owned on Rings of Power yet again, it's no, it's not really what I'm doing here, or at least not so much. I think honestly, you've held your own much better than I thought you would as far as making strong arguments for why at least you hold the opinion you do. I don't think I would change my opinion based on it, but I think that you made some admirable arguments. It doesn't seem like you're just fanboying. It would be like, yeah, well, it's Lord of the Rings, so I love it, which is often what I'm up against with both Star Trek and The Last of Us. No, sorry, not Star Trek. Star Wars and The Last of Us. Those are the things where it's just like, no, everything that comes out of this series is perfect because I'm a fan, and you're just horrible if you think that.
Oh, I know. Like, those people are possessed. Like, there's really no other word for it. I hesitate to like go out of my way and call them fake fans because it's kind of like a meme that gets thrown around a lot.
Well, I honestly just think it's
I think they're possessed by either ideology or formula. If they're very comfortable with a safe formula, and it's like that's just how they, hey, if that's how they want to consume their product entertainment, that's boring to me, but that's, I'm not
I think there's an element of familiarity bias where it's like, oh, I love The Last of Us 2 because I love The Last of Us 1, and I will spend $70 on The Last of Us Part 1 remake because I love The Last of Us 1 and I'm a big fan of it. I have a statue of Ellie, and it's like, well, okay, at a certain point, what can they do that you would be like, oh my god, fuck you guys? Yeah. Like, because there should be a line, and like, I mean, for me, I was a gigantic. If you are watching me on Rumble, which I see, by the way, Arcasul, Coconut, Andrew Matthews. Hey guys, how's it going? I just glanced at my chat for the first time. I have no idea how long those comments have been there. Sorry, I'm playing a video game, a pretty intense video game. I'm basically playing Tony Hawk with guns while having a pretty seamless conversation. I don't think at any point have I spaced out. Yeah, no, it's what I'm doing is very intense, but it has no real story component to it that I care about. So I'm just kind of
I actually have to go to the bathroom quick. I know it's my stream.
Yeah, no, I can entertain the stream.
Can you like maybe give your thoughts on the problem with like, let's say, like, I don't know how you want to approach that, but like different fandoms.
Fanboyism is probably the term that I would do. Yeah, I would say like, I think. Okay, I'll I guess I'll vamp on that while you go. Go.
I just wanted to say quickly, and then you can cover the screen. But specifically, talk about the difference, or maybe like what your thoughts are on people who are fans of something but are capable of criticizing the thing versus people who are stans. Like there's something happening there,
it's fan versus fanboy is probably how I would put that. And I mean, just for sake of definitions, I mean, you might have different definitions of what a fan is versus what a fanboy is. I think that if you are a fan of something, it means that you enjoy the core of what that thing is, and the core of that is something you understand is important to you. With things, there is a bit of leeway with things like adaptations, because like as Lofty was saying, he's like, well, I see the adaptation of Lord of the Rings by Peter Jackson to be imperfect in its own ways, but I'm okay with it being imperfect because it's still really great. And I think that's perfectly fine. But different fans will have different tolerances for adaptations of their favorite works. Like I know people who love the Witcher books to the point that they will not play the Witcher games, even though they like role-playing games. So it's like, I'm a fan of the books. I don't care what CD Projekt's done with them. I don't care if it's good or if it's well written. It's not for me. And that, I mean, for me is kind of the same thing with Neil Gaiman's Sandman, that I've had a lot of my friends recommend that show to me and be like, yeah, it's really good, dude. Like, you love Sandman, you're going to love this show. I watched 5 minutes of it, and I thought just the aesthetic of it was sort of like Harry Potter-ish. Like, it just seemed like, oh, this looks like Tim Burton's directing Harry Potter. It doesn't seem like the sort of, goth sad boy Cure, like the Crow aesthetic that I kind of think of because of the really high contrast art that's in the Sandman books. And I mean, I don't fault anyone for liking it, and I don't really even have a good argument against it. But because I'm a fan of it and not a fanboy of the brand, like I'm a fan of the comics, I'm just like, for Sandman, my version of it's going to be the comics. So I don't know, like maybe if 5 seasons go by and the show turns out to be like one of the greatest things ever made, according to like tons of different people I respect, maybe I'll give it a shot. But for now, I'm just like, I'm going to skip it. So there's a difference between being a fan of a story or a fan of characters and a fan of just the brand. And I'm parroting Mahler a little bit for that, because that's sort of what he says about the Star Wars fandom, where there's lots of people who, no matter how bad a Star Wars project is, I think Obi-Wan being the best example of one that is unbelievably bad, to the point that I can't believe that anyone who worked on the Obi-Wan Kenobi show thinks they made something good. I'm sure they exist. Like, I'm sure there are people on that crew who love the show that they made and they're proud of it. But it's the first time, like, as much as I hated The Last Jedi, I believe that Rian Johnson thinks he made a good movie. I don't believe that anyone on the Obi-Wan crew thinks they made a good show. So I think that the Star Wars fans who are like, oh god, Obi-Wan was incredible, like that moment where Vader's helmet got cracked open, that lightsaber fight, like all this, it was so cool seeing Princess Leia as a little girl. It's just so good. I'm like, do you actually like Star Wars though? Like, or do you like the Star Wars aesthetic? Do you like the brand, or do you actually like care about the characters and the story, and does it being consistent mean anything to you at all? And I mean, if the answer is no, fair enough. But I sort of put those people in a different category than either fans who like most of the stuff and will go to bat and try to think of reasons as to why things like the prequels are better than people give them credit for. Like, I think that there's a certain element of Star Wars fandom who would say, yeah, no, those people are just as much, the prequel defenders are just as much not real fans as the sequel defenders are. And I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. You could probably make an argument for that, I suppose. But I guess I just think that the, again, I guess like part of this might be anecdotal, but I think that there are a lot more situations in which I've seen people who I know are genuine fans of something, fans of Star Wars, defending the prequels, whereas it really seems like a lot of the sequel defenders are just like, no, I love big Disney thing, because they go just as hard for Star Wars as they do for MCU, and it doesn't matter how bad things get, it's all wonderful. And I don't know. I can't go that far. Part of me really like my channel. If you guys don't know who I am, my name's Marc the Cyborg. I make video game reviews and stuff, and I don't really review games that I don't like. Not because I only want to give good reviews, but because I tend to spend a lot of time with the games that I'm making videos on, and I don't want to spend time with games that I'm not enjoying. Now, I guess you could make the argument that like maybe I would have more engaging content if I was helping steer people away from bad games, but it's kind of just not what I want to do. I want to steer people towards good games because I'm a fan of a lot of different things. And I think that I try to at least fight the urge to become a fanboy of things. And probably my closest one that I know I'm wrong on about a lot of my takes about this person would be Hideo Kojima. Like, I love the Metal Gear games a lot. I know they're ridiculous and I know that they're silly, but I really think that there's a lot of awesome things about the stories and the lore, and it's all really kind of kooky sci-fi anime stuff with like geopolitical thriller elements. And it's ridiculous in a lot of ways, but I love it. And I can admit that. Whereas I think a lot of people see a direct correlation. Oh yeah, okay. I was just about to say, I think a lot of people see a direct correlation between things they like and things being good, and think that evidence of one, or that the existence of one is evidence of the other. It's like, why is it good? Because I liked it. It's like, well, yeah. Like, how does that work exactly? At what point can something be good and you not like it? Does that make it bad? Like, but yeah. But well, anyway, I think though the main point though was fan of a story and characters, or fan of a brand.
Yeah.
And like the brand is just like, yeah, no, I'm a Star Wars fan. So if it says Star Wars on the label, I love it. And it's like, well, it's kind of, that's sort of, it's putting the bar pretty low for what good Star Wars content should be, doesn't it? Or like Lord of the Rings or anything. Like, and I mean, I'm not accusing you of having that mentality with Lord of the Rings, because I mean, you're flat out saying that like, hey, if this happens, it'll be really stupid. And I don't think an MCU or a Star Wars stan would be thinking, oh my god, if Obi-Wan gains the ability to travel through time and ends up being alive during the OT, that'll be so dumb. And then another person being like, no, that'd be awesome, because then we could have like Obi-Wan and the Mandalorian on the same show. It'd be so good. It's like, would that be good? No. Like,
it's funny because a lot of people, I don't know if they just don't pay attention to me, or it's like something I say like goes viral or something because it's like controversial.
I don't think anyone listens to your arguments.
I honestly don't think they do, because it's funny, because I get called like a Disney stan or something, people call me like they just don't know, or they have a short-term memory, because I've hated every Disney Plus show, and I've been very vocal about it, except for Moon Knight. It was the only one that I actually enjoyed.
Yeah,
and I was vocal about even The Mandalorian. When everyone was quote unquote shilling for that show, including people in this community, I was pushing back against it. I did not like what they did with that show. I think it was a cheap gimmick, Kurosawa esque, basically Filoni thinking that nobody's gonna pick up on these like really watered down Kurosawa tropes. I've seen like probably 30 of the films that he's made, so like it stands out to me. Like if you watch like any of the Mandalorian episodes where they're clearly referencing like Yojimbo and some of these old Kurosawa films, it's very gimmicky, and it's like, I get it, because Star Wars did the same thing with the Hidden Fortress, like George Lucas. But he did it in a way. He did it. He actually
make the thing be the secondary characters being the perspective characters.
Yeah, no. But he did like, he didn't just use it as like a one-dimensional plot device thing, right? Like he used the myth, he used the archetype, Joseph Campbell, like hero's journey.
Yeah.
But then he kind of borrowed Kurosawa's aesthetic a little bit. I feel like the Mandalorian
mixed with a bit of spaghetti western too, and that was kind of the thing with but at the same time, it was it's kind of the elevator pitch I give for like, hey, it's usually when it's funny how this question has probably changed over the last few years, but it used to be like, why do all boys like Star Wars? And I would always say, like, ever since I was like in probably high school or maybe like late elementary school, I would just say they're samurais in space with superpowers who fly fighter jets.
Yeah.
And it's just like that, like that kind of makes a lot of sense. It's like, oh yeah, it kind of is genetically engineered to be loved by little boys.
That's true, but there's also the hero's journey, Luke Skywalker.
Because all of the, I mean, maybe not the fighter jets part, but like the samurai movies, like the science fiction, fantasy, it was superhero stories, which I mean, the Jedi are effectively superheroes, even if they're not like comic book superheroes, and I think that all those elements are basically entirely made as integral to pop culture, or not even pop culture, to storytelling, modern storytelling, that it makes perfect sense that like using the hero's journey and then tying in elements of all those things really does fit very well. And I think it's one of the many reasons, I would argue, why Star Wars has been as lasting a phenomenon as it has been, with the other one being merchandising being sort of unique in Star Wars versus anything else that was happening in the mid 70s or early 80s even. But yeah, and I think that's that brand element, or like the merchandising element, is the reason why a lot of Star Wars fandom now is skewed. And most of it, I honestly don't think a ton of the brand new Star Wars fans are like Zoomers. I think most of them are millennials who might have not really gotten into Star Wars when they were kids, but then they saw the new movies, they thought they were really cool, they were getting on board with like all the MCU stuff that was getting pretty cool. And like I don't know, I guess it just feels like there's an element of bandwagon chasing that's like, yeah, you like the things that are aesthetically fun about this series, but you don't really get why all of us connected to it as much as we did. Because there is the samurais in space with superpowers who fly fighter jets elements, but the important thing, like the glue that ties that all together, is the hero's journey stuff. It's like the story of Luke Skywalker, the prodigal rogue who like you think is just going to be out for himself, but then he comes back and he does the right thing. The princess who is who is a damsel in distress to an extent, but who also can really take care of herself and like learns a lot over the course of things, and learns to basically kind of soften up her exterior, like when she starts kind of falling for Han in Empire Strikes Back. Like there's a lot of things going on and reasons we like Star Wars that have nothing at all to do with fighter jets or superpowers or samurais in space, like there's a lot there. And I think that the big problem with all the modern properties is the aesthetics are there and all the surface level elements, but they're forgetting that the characters and the stories are kind of the reason it's special, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I do want to bring up quickly. I don't maybe you can leave whenever, but I just wanted to mention. Did you watch the stream last night?
No. I was at a wedding with X-Ray Girl.
Okay, well, it was it was crazy.
I could imagine.
It
was almost one of those things that's like, I don't need to see them doing my boy like that.
Yeah, well, listen, I think I had a lot of fun debating Shad. The problem.
Oh yeah, God, that would have been
the problem. With
now I kind of want to watch this.
Well, listen, the problem with Flashcast is, maybe it's just me because I've been doing it for so long, but it kind of turns into this like, anything goes kind of, it's hard to describe, but it doesn't, like, we've been talking about the show on this panel stream, I think pretty effectively, and like it's been a debate, but it hasn't been, you know.
Well, I mean, because you and I do this a lot. Like we did it basically with Multiverse of Madness, just offline though. Like I mean, we just don't stream our arguments about things we disagree on. But I think because you and I think seem to have a lot of similar perspectives on media, even if we disagree on specific pieces of media, that I know that when you have a take that everyone else is saying, like, this is the most ridiculous take, and it's so insane, Lofty's insane, Lofty's a shill. I'm like, no, Lofty's just different, guys, and like, he means well. I feel like, and I feel like you could call him out on the things he will dislike, and he's not ever at least with me. I mean, I can't speak for. I haven't seen all of your debates on Flashcast. I don't think he's ever gonna just be like, oh, you fucking asshole. Like you never once started screaming at me, at least, even if we do vehemently disagree on a media property.
There's something something happens, and I don't know, most people don't debate, most people don't go on streams, and they're just in chat, and I just want to explain. There's something that happens when you're on a stream with a panel with 4,000 people watching, that it kind of
Thunderdome elements.
The temperature just gets turned up a bit, and Flashcast particularly is kind of like a messy. That's the charm of it. It's kind of messy.
Yeah,
it's very messy, and we do, like, people just argue all the time. What happened with last night's was it got a little out of hand, because I think Rings of Power is so polarizing that it's hard not to kind of talk over each other,
be passionate about it in one way or the other.
Yeah, because
well, especially if you've got Shad on, like Shad
is relentless, and people are yelling at me for talking over him. But if you go back and watch that stream, everybody was talking over everybody.
Yeah,
it was now. I may have been a little bit more aggressive about it, because it's, from my perspective.
Well, I mean, you're in the underdog position.
Well, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to debate what Shad is saying. I'm also trying to preemptively address an argument that he might be making in like the next 30 seconds, so we don't have to waste time. And B, I'm trying to balance whether or not Anna's going to come in to make to chime in, whether or not Chris Gore is going to say something. So I have
Chris
like
was
all
there
of this
too,
going through my head. It's just hard to do. I don't think people realize how difficult it is to debate a bunch of different people on a stream. One thing I want to say though, this topic came up on that stream about gatekeeping, and I think maybe I misspoke. I don't know. I have to go back. Maybe I didn't misspeak, but apparently I did. I was referring to this problem that I'm like noticing in this community. It actually happens everywhere, but I just don't think it should be encouraged in our community, whatever you want to call this, which is, and people took it as though I'm personally offended, but I'm really kind of speaking as a general rule. I'm not really just talking about myself. I don't like when people get dogpiled for liking something different than that is not like the correct thing.
Oh yeah, or disliking like something that other people like. Like, and I mean, it's one of the reasons why I was pretty adamant on. We did a Final Fantasy 14 stream on the Saturday when Prey, at least in Canada on Disney Plus, because it's Disney Plus here, we don't have Hulu, came out on the Friday, and I'd watch Prey late at night. Like I thought I was just throwing it on to pass out to, and ended up watching the whole thing and thinking like, oh, that was actually like way better than I thought it was going to be. And I mentioned it, and off the bat, like a bunch of people in chat were like, oh, you like the Predator with like the strong female Native American girl? I'm like, I was like, didn't think it was perfect, but I actually did think it was a lot better than, like, I thought it was going to be a cringe, like this little 110-pound girl single-handedly overpowers a predator movie, and it wasn't. They kind of they made her arc for getting as good at hunting as she did make a degree of sense by having her brother character be like a really strong mentor who didn't entirely believe in her, but wanted the best for her, gave her some shots. She failed, and he was like, yeah, no, sorry, you just don't have what it takes. And then later in the series, later in the movie, they get on the same page. There was a bit of an awkward line drop of the, like, if it bleeds, we can kill it, which wasn't really directly attached to him, like, looking at the blood. Like, I think that, like, had he just picked up, like, there'd been some predator blood on her, and he, like, wiped her arm and then, like, held up his finger and said, if it bleeds, we can kill it. I thought that would have been a lot better than him just kind of randomly saying it. But, I mean, again, like, that's kind of nitpicking. But overall, though, I was like, hey, yeah, pretty solid movie. And, like, Az was just like, yeah, I bet it's going to be a piece of shit. And, like, was Garrett in there? No, maybe not. But I think it was a lot of people in the chat were just like, it's going to fucking suck. And I was like, guys, like, I really think you should probably give it a watch if you're going to be harping on the fact that me, a person who shares a lot of opinions that you guys do on a lot of other movies, like Last Jedi or, I don't know, Multiverse of Madness, Captain Marvel, like all those movies that are like the cliche thing for us to hate, I didn't like. But this one where it's like, this one kind of has something to it. And then like in the ensuing days, it's like, okay, all of a sudden it's like Critical Drinker liked it, Rags liked it, Mahler liked it. It's like, okay, guys, like I'm on a team with a lot of people who really know what they're talking about here. And I mean, again, I don't think I could make the argument that, again, there were people that were like 10 out of 10, like Prey is better than the original Predator. It's like, no, stop now. But if you're gonna say, yeah, it's a movie that's like a good step above random Hollywood reboot crap, and like into, hey, this is a movie that's actually kind of fun to watch. Like you could kill 2 hours a lot worse than watching Prey. Like I think that it's fair to give it that much, and I think there's a desire to be like, no, every single one that has the criteria of like, the message is automatically bad, and I'm like, I don't know. Again, like Arcane is probably my go-to example, because I'm like, you could really make the argument that Arcane is a very woke show, and a lot of it's like just surface level elements. But I'm just like, yeah, but I sort of don't care because it's good. Like I think that's sort of my big thing with this. Like I've never really had a problem with woke stuff because it's woke. My problem with woke stuff is just a lot of it sucks, and like it seems like that. There might be a correlation in a lot of sense where it's like, hey, they're hiring activists instead of writers. So yeah, surprise, surprise, the woke reboot of this property ends up being shitty. It's like, yeah, well, like, I mean, is it because of the social political messaging that was put in it? Or is it because the people writing that in are not good at what they do and they're heavy handed and it's stupid?
See, we already have somebody in the chat disagreeing with you about Arcane. Now that's fine. If you guys want to, what I'm trying to say is, if somebody thinks Arcane is woke, I don't think it's woke at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's woke. I just think a lot of it's like ultimately you can boil Arcane down to the main character, or like one of the primary co-leads of that show is a pink-haired, side-shaved lesbian who's really, really tough, and that is true. But Vi is also a pretty good character, so I don't really give a shit.
So that's an example of something quote unquote woke being a good thing. There's a lot of, you could talk about, I don't know what you think of Jordan Peele, but I think a lot of his films are quote unquote woke, but I think they're excellent, and I don't think they shove it.
I did not like Us, but I haven't seen Nope.
Us,
Nope
I thought was phenomenal.
I like Get Out though. I think Get Out's fun. Yeah. I don't think it's the masterpiece a lot of people think it is, and I don't think it's scary at all. So anytime people say, "Oh yeah, Get Out's like one of the best modern horror movies," I'm like, I don't know. Like Get Out is it's mostly a satire Twilight Zone type thing.
It is a Twilight Zone. That's what he does. He's a Shyamalan 2.0, which I think he might end up being better than Shyamalan, but we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, what Shyamalan?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So more consistent, maybe, but I mean, again, like I didn't like Us, and Shyamalan's second movie that starts with a U is, I think, his best one personally.
It is. It's a masterpiece. Unbreakable is a masterpiece.
Unbreakable, I think, is one of the best superhero movies.
Quentin Tarantino said that Unbreakable is the masterpiece of the 2000s.
I mean, I don't know that I would go that far, but it is easily one of my favorite superhero films, regardless of it being a Shyamalan film or not. I liked Split quite a lot, and I had high hopes for Glass. I liked about a half an hour of Glass, though.
Split is a really good movie.
Which makes me sad, because I'm just like, oh man, like Shyamalan, you could have had such a comeback arc if you just tried a little harder on that script for Glass.
I just want to say there's a lot of people who were taking what I was saying about the gatekeeping. Now, what I'm talking about, what I was trying to say is that for example, Rings of Power. A lot of people in this community don't like it. There's some people that do, but I actually might be the only one in, like, I don't know. But I know a lot of people do that aren't in like fandoms or like on social media, right? There's a way to criticize somebody's take on a show without calling them a shill, a fake fan, or if they don't idiot, like something, or even just
even just a more personal. I find you'll get a lot of people saying, if you like this show, you're stupid.
You're like, stupid, or it's objectively a good show. Like, no, that's not true. There is no objective. That is just.
I don't know. I think I could probably make some objective arguments for Better Call Saul or Arcane for that matter.
When you break it down to like, I don't know, like acting and stuff, I think you can
acting's a tough one. Like making an objective argument for acting one way or the other is tricky. That is a more subjective thing. And I think that you can. That's not to say that there's not choices that can be made that are objectively stronger or weaker. Yeah. But I think ultimately it'll shake out to the way the whole production's put together, like the directing, the editing, like all, and the writing for that matter. Like even before things happen.
Some people despise 2001: Space Odyssey, right? Some people despise.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I can see the argument at least for 2001. Like 2001's a really strange, abstract movie. Like I get to see a lot of people really not liking it. I mean, I think it's good and I think it's beautifully shot. It's also a movie that I would maybe watch once every decade, and I would probably be on drugs every single time.
No, not me.
Oh, really? Okay, well,
I have to take sober. I have to be sober to take in the genius of Kubrick.
Really?
I think that's just how I think. Because when I'm sober, I'm much more aware of the quality, the process of like filmmaking and like the criticisms of filmmaking and things like that. But so here's
I think that's actually the opposite for me. Granted, like really? I should again clarify. I live in a country where cannabis is federally legal for recreational use, even if you're in the military. So YouTube, don't demonetize Lofty for me talking about weed. So, but. Rumble, I'm not even sure what their deal is. Like for all I know, I'm already kicked off. I just think for me, I tend to get sucked into a movie, or like especially the type of movie like 2001, like where it is a very audio-visual experience that is atypical, I guess is probably the best way to explain it now. And I don't think you could ever make the argument that it was typical at any point. No. But I mean, maybe maybe it's some of the techniques are typical of experimental film, but definitely not of big budget Hollywood movies. And I think it would be safe to call 2001: A Space Odyssey a big budget Hollywood movie when it came out.
It's also a bad adaptation of a very good book.
Yeah, I mean, that might be fair. Also, I haven't read the book.
I always bring this up. I bring up Blade Runner. I bring up 2001, Jurassic Park. When I'm talking about adaptations, like when people say, "Oh, if I've literally heard people say if it's not exactly like the book, it's an assault on the author. It's an assault on the." I just don't agree with that. It's just I don't think that way about Blade Runner. I don't think that way about 2001: A Space Odyssey, especially Jurassic Park. I think Jurassic Park the movie is better than the book.
I think
They
I could
changed a
easily
lot.
make the argument that as not a
Yeah.
not a novel, it's comic books, but
Yeah.
both The Secret Service and Kick-Ass are
Well, there you go.
adapted by Matthew Vaughn by the same writer. It's a they're both Mark Millar books, and they're both adapted by Matthew Vaughn as Kick-Ass, like same title, and as Kingsman: The Secret Service. the the movies are so much better than the books that it's almost crazy to think that it is an adaptation. Especially Kingsman in particular. Like Kick-Ass, the book for Kick-Ass is okay. It's not amazing though, and I would argue that the movie of Kick-Ass is an amazing superhero movie. I think that it came at a time that that the genre was starting to stagnate, and it breathed some really interesting fresh air into it in a way that wasn't very Marvel-esque. Like it was an R-rated kind of indie comic thing, and and I think that the movie turned out really well. And Kingsman, I think, is like almost the best example of modern classic James Bond that you could think of. Like James Bond of the 60s, but taking place in modern day. I think Kingsman: The Secret Service is a good version of that, whereas the book is, I don't know, it's okay. It's not bad, but it's not great.
So just getting back on track quickly. If you're calling people contrarians, right, which is the opposite of a shill or whatever, Raise Your Fist gets this a lot. Angry Joe gets called a shill. I'm not even.
I'm not a huge fan of Joe, but man, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent. But his Last of Us remastered review, he just re-uploaded the same one from the 2014 PS4 version with a new thumbnail that's just the same picture of him from 2014, and the words remastered are like photoshopped on top of it. I'm like, okay, Joe, I don't agree with you with a lot, but that was pretty fucking funny.
So what I'm trying to say is, I think the concept of gatekeeping, when you're talking about gatekeeping hobbies from very toxic people, right? Generally speaking, when you think of gatekeeping, you think of woke people who are essentially trying to like subvert and like undermine and kick you out of your own hobby, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from
I also
this
see
perspective,
gatekeeping. I also see gatekeeping from a variety of different lenses. Like, for example, if you're telling somebody they're a fake fan because they disagree with you about a movie, I think this community should not only just ignore what they're saying, but should actively discourage that kind of behavior, because I think it's embarrassing, and it makes us look like leftists, and we shouldn't be doing what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm kind of always on board of the like be better than your opposition thing.
Yes, be better. Don't do what they do.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there are people who adopt different schools of thought on that, and I personally am on team like, I don't know, man. Like if I would say that the infiltration aspect that I think people in our, you could say, segment of YouTube or whatever, the internet, seem to be more sensitive about things being treated well. Like about the intention of the initial work that an adaptation is being based on, or sequel. I mean, even if it's not a new adaptation, I'd say actually more so, at least for me, it's the sequels in the same canon disregarding fundamental rules that have already been established is, I think, a gigantic problem. And I think it misses everything that made the MCU successful, as far like, because it's basically its whole deal was like, this is a collection of a decade of 20 movies where they're all their own thing, but they're also all telling one big consistent story, and you're rewarded for keeping up with this. Like, you being a fan has returns that cannot be equaled by people who aren't fans, because there's no way to do it.
Well,
it's like you can't watch Infinity War and have as much emotional impact when, say, Gamora dies if you haven't watched the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Like, I mean, and I don't think you could make the argument that's like, oh, no, she's perfectly set up in that movie. It's like,
no, she's not.
I don't know, she's maybe set up so that you could get the idea that she's important to
Peter, so Shad last
like,
night was making this bizarre, maybe he would change his mind or clarify it but he was making this bizarre argument that that within the context of the show, Galadriel, it has to be explicitly explained why she is so powerful. And I was like, okay, she's Galadriel, okay, I'm coming at it from somebody who knows who she is. I know where this show is leading to. I'm willing to suspend disbelief that she might be a pretty decent sword fighter. I'm better than most elves because that's just who she is, and that's how she's described. Not the sword fighting part, but her overall significance as like one of the more powerful elves in Middle Earth. I'm suspending disbelief. But he's like, okay, doesn't work in the context of the show because they didn't explicitly state that. But how do you do that with anything that has prequels or other things that are not within the context
Well,
of
I
the show?
think
That's
where
how-
I think, I mean, I don't want to assume because I didn't even hear his exact words. So, but what my impression of what his intention in saying that would be is that if you are going to make the audience who let's say it's a safe bet to say most people watching the show who are normies and who haven't read a Lord of the Rings novel are likely familiar with the Cate Blanchett Galadriel, right?
Yep, they are.
Who we never really see with the sword. Does she do any fighting in The Hobbit? I feel like I don't remember the
Yeah,
Hobbit
she does.
movies very well.
She fucks shit up in The Hobbit. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so like I mean maybe there's that, but I think that like if me, a person who like I said I'm a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and I've watched The Hobbit once, so I'm willing to bet a lot of normies are probably in the same camp. I'm willing to bet a good chunk of them just forgot the Hobbit movies even happened.
People are expecting Galadriel to be that character, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that what Shad's point might be is if you're going to present a version of Galadriel that seems off compared to how she was portrayed before as not a fighter, like I mean again, mostly using Lord of the Rings as a touch point, assuming, which again granted is an assumption, I'll say that there is an element of like, well, I mean, that maybe the problem is assuming that most people only know Galadriel from the Peter Jackson original Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I'm like, yeah, I guess it is a leap technically, but is it also not by far the most likely scenario? Like, I think that's kind of where I'd go with it. So if you're going to say, but no, it turns out she's actually like a ninja who can not only take out what's effectively a cave troll. I mean, I know they say it's an ice troll, but it looks basically the same as the cave trolls from the Peter Jackson movie and Fellowship.
Right. It's not
when it takes the entire Fellowship essentially working as a team to take one of them down. And so, like, I mean, and Gandalf's there too, by the way. Like,
that's a bad analogy. It's a very
is
bad.
it?
You want to know
well,
why?
I mean,
because I'll tell you why. Because two reasons. This is not canon, once again, with the trilogy. They are allowed to nerf and buff certain people and characters and demons or whatever you want to call them, trolls. I feel like they're allowed to kind of mess with their own power hierarchy because it's not canon with the trilogy.
And I don't necessarily disagree with that in theory, but I think functionally it's hard. It would be hard to make the argument to anyone who doesn't really know what Amazon's official line is with this being canon, not canon, with what, to see that ice troll scene and not think that's the same thing that they fight in Moria in Fellowship of the Ring.
Okay,
like, would that not at least be a reasonable assumption?
It's reasonable, but when I'm watching it, like from my perspective, that would be an unreasonable thing for me to assume because I know that it's not canon with the trilogy. So I'm not looking at it like that. So am I wrong? No, I'm probably right.
And let's say I think though if that same scene of her like basically taking out the troll in like 3 moves. When every single one of the elves that were under her charge, like, were basically running away or dying, and like, if you're gonna do that, it's like, I think like a good filmmaker would say, okay, now, especially the way we've designed this troll, it looks a lot like the troll that's in Fellowship of the Ring, and we established that the entire Fellowship had to like work together. Frodo had to essentially sacrifice himself. Because he didn't know, no one really knew he was wearing the mithril, and then Legolas like only is able to get one arrow in its neck when it looks up. I'm pretty sure is how they eventually kill.
Another thing is they're also fighting about I don't know hundreds of orcs at the same time. So
yeah, sure, but like I mean, it still is a bit odd to be like, hey, this boss character in this thing that took a whole team working at like. Working their asses off to take out but like the main point that I think is very critical. It's like you put that in the like second scene of your first episode. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
like, so
me,
if you're gonna do that, it's like, if you're gonna present a Galadriel that's that far off from the one that's popularly known, and have her doing something that
no, Sketch.
seems
That's not what I'm saying.
okay.
Sketch. I am not saying you can do anything and add Bigfoot to the thing. I'm saying you can tweak things, right? There's definitely, you would agree, there are some things that they should be allowed to. You don't have to be identical to the
Well, I
Peter
mean,
Jackson stuff,
I'll tell you where I
right?
thought they did something that
I
was
think
kind
there's
of
no. I
good
just
and
think there's a gray area. I think that this show, with Galadriel already being essentially the strongest elf in existence, out with Feanor dead and all this stuff, I think it's not that much of a leap to say that she can take out a troll. It's not like she's an alien flying in a submarine. That is those are
yeah,
not the same things. I think it's a bad. I think that's a bad argument.
Well, it's mostly that level of hyperbole is just
It's very hyperbolic.
it's kind of ineffective because it's sort of it'll turn into a war of just really exaggerated analogies.
Yeah, because they changed stuff about the books in the film trilogy.
Well,
right?
here I'll tell you where I think it was done in a way that I wouldn't say is necessarily good, but a way I found acceptable and a decent way to add more tension to a scene that if they didn't do it this way would have had less. It was in the second episode when Bronwyn and that kid are fighting the orc. Or the goblin, I guess. Whereas that was an enemy that we kind of think of being like, again, fans of the Lord of the Rings cinematic universe or whatever they want to call it. Think of orcs as like the cannon fodder. And that was a scenario where it's like, oh no, but when you're not trained soldiers and adventurers and there's just like an orc in a barn with you, it could be a pretty big problem if it wants to kill you. So maybe you should respect these things as being like a reasonable threat, which I think is like, it's probably the most accurate problem people have with the stormtroopers, like in Disney canon, where it's like, hey, these guys are supposed to be threatening, and you've made it canon that they can't shoot. So was that a good idea? No. Whereas I think that I think it was a weird move to similarly make the first time we see one of these trolls to have it be killed by anyone in what looks like an effortless fashion. Because I think that honestly you could have made Galadriel just as awesome if she still had to work for the kill, or like if it seemed like she was really like yeah, it was maybe it was her took it out alone, but it was like she really had to fight. Like there was just like, oh, a cave troll. Okay, I'll take it out. Like it kind of seemed more like that.
Yeah, no, I will agree with that. That's I gave the show an 8. I think that was one of my nitpicks with the show was the troll scene and the prologue in the first episode. I think it was rushed, and I think the troll scene could have been done better. I'm not saying that it was good. I'm just saying it's believable that she doesn't have the Ring of Power yet. She is thousands of years younger than she is in the Third Age. There's a lot of things that people are just either ignoring or they don't know. They're making these false comparisons to Galadriel 3,000 years older than what she is in the Second Age to when she has the Ring of Power in the Third Age. That is just a terrible comparison to make. It's just if you think about putting a Ring of Power on your finger, what kind of power that gives you. I don't know how I don't know how you can disagree with me on that, but that to me is putting her in this category, right? Where she it almost makes sense where she would be a sword fighter. There's no instance, there's no reference of her using spell casting in any of the Second Age, or even really the First Age. I think there's some vague references. She's not a wizard. She's not a mage. She does some enchanting, right? She learns enchanting from one of the Maiar, but people are acting like she's this sorceress, right? I either think they just are making assumptions.
I think it's like they do in the movies even refer to her as like the Witch of the Woods, and like yes. I mean the shit she does with Frodo is, I mean I can't do that.
Yes. Yeah, but listen, Elrond is an incredible
Instead of a king, you'd have a queen,
right? If you see if people, okay, the Hobbit trilogy, Elrond has some badass fight scenes. He's got now is that weird for him to be to be good. Like I when I'm talking,
I
about
guess
is,
you're
like,
right. He does have like the same with the healing magic
but
and
but I,
fellowship. Of
yeah,
the
but
Ring. I
I'm
was like,
saying
does he
like,
ever do magic? And I was like, oh yeah, he does.
well, yeah, he does. He has a ring of power also.
Yeah, I know.
But he heals Frodo. He also keeps he protects Rivendell. He has, yeah, they're all powerful. But it's, if you have 4,000 year old elf, right? It's just, it doesn't, it's very, uh it makes sense that at some point, if you were to ask, hey Tolkien, at any point in Galadriel's history, because you don't have much written about her history, is it, do you think she had maybe like some sword fighting training, and maybe she like participated in a battle or two?
Yeah, and I mean,
I have a
I don't
feeling he would
think
be like, yeah, she's a really good sword fighter, but she just doesn't really need to do that very often. Like, it makes sense. She's
I would
thousands of years
never.
old. I
I
would learn
wouldn't.
martial arts if I lived to be 200. I would probably
Fair
just,
enough.
you know what I mean? Like, that's, it just totally makes sense to me.
I mean, I think though
Yeah.
that my issue with it is more that like, if this is like a character that has been shown in media before, not as a warrior, it's kind of like, well, almost like if you've never made a movie about this superhero before, maybe doing 5 minutes of origin might be a good idea. Whereas at the flip side of that is, if there's another Spider-Man movie or Batman movie, I think we could probably all do the math on the origin. Like, we don't need to necessarily go through too much specific detail to understand what like Spider-Man and Batman's deal are. Where
Yeah.
if Galadriel's being presented in a fashion that is fairly different from how a lot of like mass audiences will understand her, and again, it's not that you can't make her a really good sword fighter, but I think that having it be her introduction to, oh, this is sword fighter Galadriel, by the way, being her fighting a very powerful enemy single-handedly and effortlessly is just not a good way to do that. Whereas
Yeah,
I think
you can
that
have
if they made
that
it so
criticism.
that say you do a flashback of they started with a flashback of her like basically getting bullied, which was I think a bit on the strange side, but it was like not really a big part of the show, so I wouldn't go into it all that much. But I think though that had like in that flashback sequences at the beginning, like maybe have her and her brother training to fight together and doing the kind of thing that like maybe he's teaching her how to do something, and knowing that he had always been teaching her the ways of war while she like learned, I don't know, her enchantments or whatever. I mean, whether or not that's how it actually goes down, again, I'm not making any assertions on, but I just think that if you do that, then you could probably get to, in like episode 2, episode 3, her taking out a cave troll and it making more sense to the audience, because it's like, oh yeah, I mean, it is Galadriel who's the the witch lady from the woods in Fellowship of the Ring, but also she's now this character who we have seen trained to become a great swordsman, even though, like, I don't know, maybe it's not typical of elven women to be sword. I guess Arwen has a sword, but Arwen's not doing a whole lot of fighting.
Galadriel is described as Amazonian aesthetic, Amazonian athletic, and very manly in the books. So that's directly from Tolkien's own letters. Her mother named her, I can't remember her elvish name that was before Galadriel, which means light maiden, I believe. No, light something. Her original name was Elvish for man maiden. Okay, because she had the athletic abilities of the top level men in her of her kin.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, though that I would
so.
probably agree with Shad, though, that because that is going to be very new information for a lot of your audience, and also you're establishing a new show, so realistically, you kind of can't assume that anyone just already knows what this character's backstory is, especially when you can't say like, well, everyone's seen the movie,
have you
right?
seen? Yeah, but have you seen the new Top Gun? I mean, Tom Cruise runs circles over all of those people, right? Why is he so much better than them? Well, he's had a history. Have you seen the original Top Gun? Do you know what happened? No. So why is he so much better? Well, maybe go watch the original Top Gun.
I don't. Yeah, well, I mean, sure,
also,
but like, also, if you watch the original Lord of the Rings, you're not going to see Galadriel soloing cave trolls, you know?
No.
So that's what I mean. Like, if you don't have the
okay.
reference of like, okay, if you can go watch Top Gun 1 before you watch Top Gun 2,
I just think it's okay to not over exposition literally everything in the show, because there's so much lore, you can't do it. So guess what they didn't do in Lord of the Rings? They didn't explain where Gandalf came from. They didn't explain why he had his abilities. He's just a powerful wizard, okay? They didn't explain any of that in the book. He doesn't even, you know what I mean? So I don't want exposition. Sorry, I actually hate exposition.
Well, no, but I think the difference is though that if you're talking about Gandalf, for example, we're not given a whole lot of backstory on Gandalf and everything like that at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring.
So why is he so powerful? Why does it make any sense? How am I
but the thing is, though,
where his power came from? You're not supposed to know that.
You could,
it's a mystery.
But what I'm saying is, you can make the argument that we see the less powerful Gandalf the Grey in Fellowship of the Ring, and then he does explain how he comes back essentially as an angel, as Gandalf the White in Two Towers. Like, we do get some explanation of what happened to him in the interim and how much time that felt like it was passing for him.
Yes, we do.
And I think it would be different if the Hobbit movies came first and Gandalf was, or I mean, not the Hobbit movies. Like, let's say Rings of Power came before anything, or like a Silmarillion adaptation, something about the Second Age or early Third Age, whenever it is lore that Gandalf was actually in it. If we saw Gandalf either before or after we've seen him most popularly acting very, very differently and being skilled in a totally different like character class, you could say, if like to compare it to an RPG, I wouldn't dispute that some members of the audience would be like, wait, hold on, why does Gandalf have a warhammer or something like that? It's like, did Gandalf always use a warhammer? Is this new? It's like, yeah, well, I mean, Gandalf, you know, he's really powerful. Why wouldn't he have a warhammer? It's like, yeah, I mean, sure.
I know what you're saying.
It's still weird, though.
I think if you stop at that question and don't try to find the answer, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because that's, you know what I mean?
Like, but I think that ultimately where it ties into Galadriel.
She's a captain. She's established as a captain of a troop of elves, right? Mm-hmm. Why is it exactly unrealistic for a captain of or whatever you want to refer to a captain as, but that's what they call it in the show.
Yeah.
Why is it unrealistic that she would just be a much better fighter than the people that she's leading?
I mean, I don't necessarily think that. I don't think that necessarily. Really, I don't necessarily think it's unrealistic, and I don't think any of this is impossible.
Why is it such a problem that she can kill the troll and they can't?
Because it seems ridiculous on screen, considering what we know about Galadriel, what they've established about this version of Galadriel being different by that point, which is very little realistically, because we don't know anything about her.
She's a captain and she's hundreds, if not thousands, of years old. If you want to ignore that, then I guess we don't know anything about her.
I mean, yeah, well, I mean, okay, but like it's still very. I mean, that's it's like
I don't see it. I've never had one person give me a compelling reason why she can't take out a cave troll or an ice troll. I think
the big thing is like, why is anyone taking out an ice troll that easily?
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, I think if you're going to, as a sen, like you're. Like, he didn't really like.
No, he took out an Oliphant very easily.
yeah, and I mean, but at least by that point, there was an element of like, okay, the Oliphant in Return of the King.
Christopher Tolkien hated
there was,
what they did.
Yeah, I know. I was about to say, I was like, let's face it. At that point, there was a fair amount of Legolas fan service happening for that scene.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, no, like I think you could very easily make that argument, and I think that the only reason that in the Peter Jackson movies, I think they get away with him being like effectively a Gary Stu is that his interactions with Gimli make him being that much better than Gimli funny, and like it works in a way where it serves their characters and their chemistry, like the chemistry between John Rhys Davies and Orlando Bloom is so good that it doesn't feel like they're really undermining Gimli. It's like Gimli like really is like, fine, like I'm actually a super good fighter. Like I'm better than almost everybody, but this elf is so damn good that it's annoying me and I kind of love him.
Like, it's a good relationship. But
what I mean is like that is it's such a gamble. Like you can make that work, yes, but man, you got to be careful. Like the second you make a character that overpowered, you really run the risk of them not at all being likable. And I found that was kind of my problem with Mary Sue Galadriel, or like or whatever you want to call her. Like I mean, I don't even need to necessarily denigrate it as as a like by applying the Mary Sue label, but it's more just ultimately I didn't connect with the character because I was like, okay, wait. I don't think I'm on board with Galadriel being like.
Well, they're giving her a lot more character development than they give Legolas. So here, what I
think
though,
but Legolas isn't the central character of the story though. So Legolas being like the badass who kind of pops up there and is like a sidekick character in the Fellowship, essentially, who just has like a good moment or two per movie. I mean, a few good moments per movie. Let's face it.
But people,
I think it is a little bit different than
that are not protagonists.
I don't think as much. Like, I think it's harder to complain about an overpowered character that like isn't the primary driving force of the story. I think the problem with, say, Rey being as much of an MS as she's accused of is we're meant to look at her as our new Luke Skywalker. So when she's too perfect for us to relate to her, that becomes a problem because it's like, it's a lot of what made Luke interesting is that he was very relatable. Because he just seemed like classic hero's journey stuff.
I think if you're putting Rey and Galadriel in the same category, you're crazy because Rey had zero training and she was literally stronger than like Luke in Return of the Jedi. She went and trained with Luke.
Well, I mean, I didn't say
like
it was
a day.
I wouldn't say that they're directly analogous, but I think the point is ultimately it comes down to I'm not. Like, I mean, I guess like this is just me saying subjectively. It's the problem with either of them is just fundamentally me not connecting to the character because they seem like they seem too perfect. I think I think that primarily I would argue that my issue is primarily with the writing. I did. Again, from a person who enjoys well choreographed and acted action scenes, I'm not crazy about the choreography and the actor who is doing the action scenes. I don't think she's particularly good at it, but I also, I mean, ultimately, I think it's not necessarily her fault. Like, you could make the argument it's like whoever choreographed the fight scene or like designed the wire work or edited the scene, like all of that kind of matters more than just the actor's physicality. With the exception of, I don't think the direction or editing in the first episode of The Witcher, like in the Blaviken scene, I don't think it's spectacular, but I think that Henry Cavill owning the physicality of the character and the moment as well as he did really elevated an action scene that otherwise would have been just kind of mediocre. Like, I mean, it's basically Geralt's in a town and he fights like 3 guys. Like, it's not really that crazy an action scene, but it just, Cavill like really sells it. And I don't think this actress does that. But again, I think the majority of the fault is on the people writing, directing, and designing the special effects and stunt choreography. So,
we are.
I mean, again, like it's why this kind of
an action.
Yeah, that's the thing. These conversations can often oscillate between what is writing and what is the other elements of filmmaking, and the tricky thing is they all kind of bleed into each other a lot.
Yeah.
And strengths in one can make up for weaknesses in another, absolutely, though.
Yeah. So I might have to go soon, but just to wrap up this conversation, are you going to continue to watch this show?
I don't know. I almost didn't. I almost was tapped out after episode 1. Honestly, if you didn't invite me on this stream, I probably would not have watched episode 2 this weekend. I might have been like,
Are you curious though what they're going to be doing with like the Rings of Power and like Sauron's revival, and like does any of that like interest you or no?
Not really, no. Because I mean, I know where it's going.
I know, but I'm just saying.
I mean, I unlike House of the Dragon, where I also know where it's going because I listened to the audiobook of Fire and Blood. Yeah. I'm intrigued enough by how they're doing it, and I think that the performances and the dialogue writing and all that stuff is at a high enough standard that I want to see how it plays out anyways. Whereas a lot of the mystery in this Lord of the Rings kind of feels like, I don't know, like a J.J. Abrams type mystery where it's like, I get
Gary
it.
And
mysterious. But I mean, and but I mean,
which Game of Thrones had galore, by the way.
Well, I mean, Game of Thrones absolutely
and everybody
did,
liked Game of Thrones, so I don't necessarily think mystery box is a problem.
But I think that it just seems
it's only a problem when it's convenient for some people.
Well, I mean, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the mystery
not
box
you.
aspect is a problem because it's convenient for it to be a problem. I think it's because, I mean, again, like I could be wrong about the stranger being Gandalf, but I'm like, to me, I'm like, okay, mystery box character falling from the sky. And then once he talks to the fireflies, I'm like, okay, so it's Gandalf. And I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I guess there you go. They
listen,
misled
if you are
me.
Wrong, but wait, if you are wrong, wouldn't that kind of imply that you kind of like took yourself out of the world building to the point where you're not? Because what I'm, from my perspective, it doesn't imply that it's absolutely Gandalf. It could be a Balrog. There's did you pick up on? Did you pay attention to any of the fire themes? What he said about fire? He said "ure manna" to one of the Harfoots, which is Kenya, which is an Elvish language. It means what is fire or what is heat.
Mm-hmm.
So there is so much going on with fire, heat, temperature, things like that. If you're going to just ignore all of that, I mean, that's fine.
Well,
but
I mean,
that's part of the story. It's part of the mystery. It's fun to kind of theorize like what all of this means.
I guess here, I think the difference would be I'm not necessarily ignoring it consciously and being like, well, I've decided that this is what the answer is, and whatever it ends up being, I don't care because I've decided that's Gandalf and that's stupid. Yeah. It's not really that. I'm like, I sort of feel like I know where a lot of the mystery box elements are going, and that kind of makes them not compelling to me. And the more important factor is I haven't really enjoyed watching the show for the most part. Like, again, with the exception, like I said, the Moria scenes in there. So it's like, well, I was like, yeah, okay, I care about this universe enough that I'd kind of like to know what happens in a story set in it. But this version of it is not really doing anything for me, so why should I stick with it? Well, and honestly, fair. Like, hey, like, watch the second episode and come on and talk to your friend Lofty. Who,
well, listen.
I didn't really hang out with you very much when you got kicked off Twitter, because I realized that we mostly communicated through Twitter.
I know, dude.
But
we should set up another.
I mean, yeah, but like that's kind of what this was. So like, I mean, it gave me the excuse, especially like that I can log some of my Rumble hours while doing this. It's like perfect. It's like, okay, so I'll use this as the excuse to watch the second episode of Rings of Power, which means whether I'm talking poorly or positively about the show, I'm now slightly more informed on it. Though even when I was talking to you on Twitter, I did very specifically state I only watched one episode. So because knowing that you watched both and that the review that I was replying to that you gave, like your 8.5, was factoring in both episodes, I immediately said, hey, I've only watched the first one, so understand that my opinions are coming from having only seen that episode. Yeah, and until this afternoon when like you invited me to the stream, I was like, okay, I got to watch the second one now.
Well, that's fine. I mean,
like I live in an area where getting to a store is not the easiest thing to do, so I'm always gonna have an Amazon Prime subscription.
Yeah, dude.
Like that's streaming shows have nothing to do with why I'm an Amazon Prime member.
Here's what you should do, in my opinion, whether you like the show or not, or whatever. I think you should continue to watch this so you can be involved in the conversations, because I think that's fun.
Yeah, and I think if I do, that's probably going to be why I watch it. Whereas honestly, House of the Dragon, I could quit YouTube tomorrow and I'm still watching the rest of that show. Or at least at this point. I mean, they could always lose me at some point, but I'm definitely not watching that show because I feel like I want to talk to some of my buddies about it. I'm watching that show because I've been enjoying it. In fact, there's a new episode that's already out.
There is a new episode. I'm going to watch that soon. My brother just
I didn't realize it was this late. I think X-Ray Girl might actually be awake and mad at me, being like, I was been waiting for you to watch House of the Dragon. So maybe we should wrap this up soon.
Yeah, I'm just going to wrap it up by saying what I mean by give it a chance. I think everyone should at least see how they depict Numenor, because that's going to be a very interesting either point of no return for some people. If they do it really well, if the sets are amazing, I think some people might be turned on. Numenor is supposed to be, I don't know, it could be really cool to watch. That's next week, by the way. That's the city that gets, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't spoil it.
I know a little bit about what happened.
Yeah, it's like the city of Atlantis. Yeah. My point about why everybody, I just wanted to wrap this up by saying I gave the show an 8.5. It's probably more like an 8 if I'm averaging the 2 episodes. See,
I thought episode 2 was better than 1. Oh, though
I agree.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I thought you were saying once the second one came out, you dropped it.
Yeah, the
I
reason
realized
why
they were both the same day.
No, yeah. The reason why maybe people see it say, oh, it's too high. The way I'm looking at it is this is a 5-season long show. I like what they're setting up personally, and I think it's been pretty consistent the first 2 episodes in terms of what I'm looking at, the quality of all of the storylines, right? I think they're setting up the intersection of these storylines to be very significant. I know where it's going. I'm excited to see Sauron. I'm excited to see the Forging of the Rings. I'm excited to see way more of the dwarves. I want to see fucking orc battles. I'm way more optimistic, I guess, than a lot of people. So that's just where I'm
Yeah, and I mean, and that's fair.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think there was any chance I would come on here and convince you that you're wrong about liking a thing.
No, me neither.
And
That's
I think that
yeah.
I do agree with some of your positive points, and I hope that you maybe agree with some of my negatives, because I think we have agreed on a few things. Even if you don't agree with my negatives, you understand where I'm coming from on them.
I think I agree with your negatives, but they don't personally
bother you as much.
They don't bother me. I'm not like annoyed by it, and I think I can find.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I was at with Metroid
Yeah.
Other M. That if you want to see me going to the mattresses over a video game on my comment section, God, there's some discussions of sexism in Other M that I chose violence on. I'll admit. Because my whole thing is, if a lot of people were bothered that Samus is taking orders from like a male officer in Other M, and they seem to always talk about it in like oddly like childish language, to be like, yeah, she has to wait for daddy to tell her she can use a weapon. I'm like, well, this is a mission where she's working with the Galactic Federation, not as an independent bounty hunter, and he's a commander that she respects, so she's following his orders like voluntarily to stay within the mission parameters and the rules of engagement. I was like, it has a negative effect on the gameplay, so in that respect I hate it. But calling it sexist, I think, is ignoring that chain of command exists and has nothing at all to do with gender or sexism. I'm like, I don't know. I don't see this the way you guys see it. But man, there are some. I think I got picked up in the everything is sexist algorithm, because I got some commenters who very much don't like Samus not being perfect. And I'm like, I don't know, like her having some vulnerability, it endears her to me a little, I gotta say. But Other M's still pretty much the worst game in the series. It's just I found myself having to reluctantly defend it, because I don't think it's the worst because it's sexist, the way apparently other people do.
Yeah. I don't know much about it.
Yeah,
but
watch my video. It's 2 hours long.
I know.
Though I did put timestamps in, so you can
I tried to watch Mahler's 5-hour long.
Well, yeah, see, that would be tricky for you because you like Multiverse of Madness.
I did.
That was the last thing that you and I really disagreed on.
Dude, I tried to watch it, and I got frustrated because I think he was. I just disagreed with like 35 things in like 30 minutes.
I think you should probably skip to after the plot summary element of it and go more to his like conclusions.
So here's what,
because I think that's where you'd probably find things more interesting than just here are the individual elements of this movie that I think are bad and why.
What he's doing is the definition of nitpicking, right? It's a 5-hour long frame by frame nitpick of the entire movie. You could do that with a lot of movies, by the way, but he that's a lot of time
although
and
effort,
effort,
I think
right?
Mahler,
that's a lot of effort.
Mahler in particular though does his definition of a nitpick versus like a criticism, I think has merit to it, because basically what he says
he does.
Is like, because a lot of people, I think that you could argue that him picking out like 5 problems within 30 seconds or something is nitpicking just because of volume. But I mean, I think that a more accurate definition of nitpick, to the point that you could actually say, okay, like you're actually nitpicking, these things don't matter, is, do these problems have an effect on the story in a significant way?
Correct.
And would it be a different movie if those problems were not there? And I think that's where, like, his issue with Multiverse of Madness is that so many of these problems have such dramatic effects, and the movie treats it like, well, but, you know, we're moving on. That's just a thing now. Deal with it. Yeah, no, she wants her children back more than anything else. No, she doesn't mention vision in this movie. Shut up, you bigot. Okay, now
some of the stuff is fine. It doesn't bother me. That, you know, his criticisms. Some of it is a little crazy to me. It's like it would be like me complaining, pausing. Let's say like the Infinity War fight sequence on Thanos' strange Spider-Man
on
right?
Titan. Yeah,
would what he's doing. Okay, I could do with Infinity War.
Oh no, he Mahler has done that with Infinity War. A lot of people have a lot of issues with that fight scene in particular.
Yeah, so
because it basically like Doctor Strange
could have chopped the fucking arm off of Thanos.
Yeah, no,
and
that's
taken the gauntlet with his portal.
Very valid criticism.
Now when I'm watching that movie, I love that movie, by the way.
So do I.
I do not take things that seriously where I have to nitpick every little thing.
Like, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily say it's
operate
like
as a fan.
I think though that where because this could be you know, PSA Sitch's law is just most arguments on the internet are arguments over definitions, even though neither side realizes it.
Yeah.
I think that might be what is starting to happen even between you and I. Never mind if you start talking to Mahler about this with the term nitpick and how it should be applied. Yeah. Whereas I think you guys would probably actually have a pretty interesting talk.
I would love to talk to them, but I'm not going to go out of my way to tell people to talk to me. But my point about what I think sums it up perfectly is people are much more hyper magnified, focused on the problems with the MCU than they ever were with the problems of the MCU. And I think the problems with the MCU, there are a lot of the same problems with the MCU, but those films didn't insult your intelligence in terms of storytelling in the same way that they have done recently.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of my bigger...
Yeah.
But I mean, that said, I know you and I'm not going to be able to convince you my thoughts on Multiverse of Madness because I've tried it and I know it doesn't work. But I'm on board with Mahler in that I think it's the worst MCU movie the worst Sam Raimi movie.
Wait. You think it's worse than Eternals?
I didn't see Eternals, to be fair. It's the worst MCU movie that I've seen. But also with Eternals, yeah.
Oh man, come on, dude! Multiverse of Madness is a much more entertaining movie than Shang-Chi.
I don't know. I think Shang-Chi does less damage, even though it does a pretty significant amount of damage. Oh no, I don't think it's fun, and I think it has about 20 minutes where I was kind of into it at the beginning of the movie, like when he was actually just a guy who was really good at martial arts. Yeah, and then it turns into like Chinese Wakanda bullshit at the end, and I'm just there I was out. And I think that the most cringe MCU thing, even though I don't really use that term personally very much, the most cringe MCU thing that happens in any even Phase 4 movie is the girl no, not Awkwafina, his sister explaining how she learned martial arts. And the way it's not even the actress's fault. It's the way the dialogue is written, because it seems like it was written by someone who's like, make sure it's very clear that she's better than her brother. Yeah, because the actual line is like, I learned how to fight the way he did by watching his training. Only I taught myself to do it better. And it's like, why did you need that part of the line?
Yeah, that's a good example.
Did you have to add and by the way, I'm better than him? It's like a good example because now this is Shang-Chi's first movie. You're shitting on the hero of your movie.
I know.
What are you doing? I don't know.
Another good example from that movie is Awkwafina's character launching an arrow thousands of feet into the air and killing a dragon.
Yeah, that was done too. But honestly, I think, well, I mean, she. To be fair, I'll give her that she does train. It's for a day, not a long time, but it is different than saying
kill a dragon with an arrow. I could kill a
I'm just saying, if there's Marvel stands that are EFAPing this stream right now, or I guess it would be in the future, they will say she does train, and they would technically be right. They would, like, because I mean,
I don't count that as
there's
training.
it's
like
fair,
ray training.
and I
That's
mean,
the same thing as
yeah,
ray
it's
training.
ray training in Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, it's about the same level. I'm not saying it's done
worse
well.
because
I'm
she's
just saying,
human
like,
person.
it's like
She's not a
Jordan Peterson wise. Let's be specific with our words, eh?
Yeah.
Precise in our speech. But yeah, it's that kind of thing that more
She's
I think
been
that
training her whole life as a comedian, and she's transferred her.
I don't know.
she learned how to do it better than all the men. Why did anyone mention the men? It's like no. It's like, how about you just taught yourself? Teaching yourself how to do it and doing it at a functional level is impressive enough.
Very cringe.
And if you eventually beat him, we can do the math that you're better. But saying it in a line of dialogue just sounds so dumb. But anyways, my bigger point, the reason why I would say Multiverse of Madness bothered me a lot more than Shang-Chi did, and the reason why I think it is actually the worst one, is there's characters in that movie that I care about who I think they just flat out ruined. And I honestly have trouble thinking of any character who was in that movie who wasn't ruined to a degree. And again, this is things that, like, I mean, I've actually been accused because, like, people know that I talk to Mahler, and like I don't know if I'm lucky enough to say he's my friend at this point, but like I've been on EFAP a fair amount of time, so like I know the guy. So a lot of people are like, yeah, that's just your inherited opinion. I'm like, no, ask X-Ray Girl. The second I walked out of that theater, I said that is the worst Marvel movie, and it made me sad in a lot of places. And a lot of it is because I think it kind of ruins Doctor Strange. It sort of ruins fucking Rachel McAdams' character, Christine. He keeps on calling her Regina George in it from Mean Girls, and so I keep on in Mahler's video. So I now keep on wanting to call her Regina. I'm like, I know that's not the character's name. Though, fun fact, I'm in Mean Girls. Actually, I am at the spring fling dance.
I just think that that Sam Raimi alone put more quality into that film than anything that was in Shang-Chi. Like, I
don't know. Like, to me, the way I read it, the way I read the Sam Raimi isms that are there, and I'll give you that they are there, is it felt like the skeleton or the facade of a Sam Raimi movie being draped over a PG-13 Disney film that thought it was a horror movie. And like, I mean, it like none of it worked for me because I'm like, I don't find this scary. I think that your attempts at making it scary are just not only ruining Wanda, they're ruining Wong, Strange, and really all of the sorcerers in the MCU. Because you're basically saying that the full weight of every single magic user in the MCU, all working together, cannot defeat Wanda. They can't even slow her down. And I'm like, well, I mean, really, like, I think you probably could have made it so that Wanda was, like, outsmarting them, and that would be a lot more interesting, but it kind of just seems like she was standing in the middle of the open while they were going to town with everything they had, and they couldn't touch her. And what bothered me about it more so was, which you might look at this as a nitpick, is she was specifically blocking their projectiles with her hands, right? Or, I mean, is that fair to say? No, or at least do you remember?
No, I think she was.
Siege of Camouflage? She was, which means that if you have faster projectiles, you would probably be able to kill her. And it's like, okay, if they have cannons, like why do you guys not have a machine gun? Like if this is an important place, right? Like Camouflage, it's not like it's not a place that you can just allow to be attacked.
I'm sure you've read comics, right? Where there's a fight between two characters, and you kind of suspend disbelief in terms of maybe if they had a machine gun, this would have happened. Maybe this, but that's kind of the point of a comic book, right? If they had a machine gun, they would have just given her a different power or something. You know what I mean?
I mean, sure, but that's what I mean. It's like when you're constructing those scenes, think like, hey, wait, why are there not people in your writing room that are saying, hold on, wouldn't they be able to stop her immediately if they just did this? And then have someone not say, well, okay, screw it, we've already started shooting and storyboarding, so we'll write the script later. It's like, wait, no, stop. Why, instead of having her individually block the projectiles with her hands, why doesn't she just create a bubble? And like, it just established that their magic can't get through her bubble, their arrows can't get through the bubble, the cannons aren't doing anything. And at that point, you don't have to have the audience thinking, wait, hold on, if they have cannons, like, why do they not have an M60 that they can just be unloading on her? Why not 10 of them? And if she needs to block each bullet individually, I mean, like she's still mortal, right? Like she was always a human, even though she had like her magic abilities, I guess, apparently from childhood, which is also
I get what
new.
you're saying. I've just read enough comic books where that shit happens all the time.
But I think though that it's always
a comic book movie.
But
it's not
at the same time, though, every single one of those comic books, I mean, like, yeah, but at what point do you stop taking things seriously as the writer of a comic book movie, you know? Like, because, I mean, I think that...
read old Doctor Strange comics, right? If you read his original Claremont... I think it's Claremont, right? The original Doctor Strange.
I couldn't tell you.
There's a lot of weird stuff going on. There's a lot of things that he does that... with like portals and shit, or like creatures that he summons out of the dark dimension, that it's like, why didn't he do that against this villain? Why didn't he? That's kind of how
I mean, yeah, but like, I mean, I think though that with Multiverse of Madness in particular, the thing to note is that this is one of our heroes that you have going up against another one of our heroes. Yeah. So you should probably have it be the kind of thing like, hey, who would... I mean, yeah, and I mean, in Civil War, I think they did at least a reasonable job of keeping the power levels consistent with how they were established, and having the underpowered team that Steve was on, for the most part, at least. I mean, with, I guess, Wanda being a pretty key exception, have a couple aces up their sleeve, being the only reason why they were able to kind of come out on top. Like Ant-Man, the first appearance of Giant Man for Ant-Man was that scene in Civil War. So it's like, wait, hold on. That's a new power that does make sense with what his suit can do. And it really does change the flow of that fight in a significant way, where it's like, oh, okay, this now there's a new element here. Let's see where this goes. Whereas with Wanda against the Sorcerers of Kamatage was just like, okay, yeah, no, they've got nothing on her, I guess.
But I understand, but my only... I just can't. I have struggle with this, because when people start bringing up things like, well, why don't they have machine guns? Why did Strange not use the freezing magic that he had? Why did he use it once and not like ever again? Why did he? My problem is, you could do this with literally everything. So if you start doing it with Multiverse of Madness, go back to Civil War. Why did Strange not teleport everyone into a jail cell?
Strange wasn't around for Civil War.
I thought he was on the...
No, his accident is the day he was called to Tony Stark operate on Rhodey.
Yeah, so like, why didn't Tony Stark detach himself from his suit and attach his suit onto Bucky and trap him in a suit of armor and lock the suit down? Like, I mean,
honestly,
you could come up with 130 million different things that they could have done differently.
And if that had been a thing, but I was saying that if that move was the thing that he'd established as having done to defeat people before, yes, it does bring up the question, why isn't he always doing that? And I think that as the writer of a comic book, or a comic book movie for that matter, you should be aware of the canon that you're writing within, because you're not just writing an original story where all the rules are up to you. You're working within boundaries. I think a lot of these writers, I think, have that level of hubris where they're like, well, fuck the boundaries. I'm an artist. Yeah. It's like, well... yeah, but you can make original shit too. Like, you don't have to be working in like an established universe if you don't really care about the rules of it, because I don't know, I think the rules are what makes it interesting when something goes beyond them or stretches them or gets to the point that's like, wow, within this rule set, or I mean, for lack of a better term for it, I've seen some crazy things happen, but I've never seen that. And now when I think about it and I look back on it, it all does make sense with the stuff that came before. And I find that so much more satisfying than just, I'm adding new force powers to the Star Wars film. I'm adding new magic to Wanda's repertoire. I'm adding new spells to Strange's repertoire and forgetting old ones because they're inconvenient right now. Like, I'm just are you guys not getting paid hundreds of $1,000s to write these movies? Like, why are us nerds on the internet having more in-depth discussions about what your parameters should be? Like, I think like you guys should be the experts on it, right? Like, you're the ones who have made a career on, like crafting these worlds. So why does it feel like any idiot is going to be better at it than most of you people are? And that's kind of the part of it that I find is like it's a road that Star Wars has been on since 2017, and I think it's a road that Marvel's been on for about 2 years now. Whereas before it was like,
just Star Wars is more obvious because with Marvel you're dealing with wizards that go into the dark dimension. To me, it's like cosmic shit to me.
It should be much easier to keep Star Wars sorted out. You're right.
It should be way easier because you know what I mean? That's why I'm just willing to give a lot of these Marvel movies the benefit of the doubt in terms of suspension of disbelief. I'm like, okay, just entertain me, tell a good story. But with Star Wars, there is so much mythology. You can't just invent midichlorians. I'm sorry, you can't do that. That's like, you can't just invent a healing ability that would have worked. Like, you know what I mean? In Revenge of, or in Rise of Skywalker.
Like, I think it's the same thing. And like, I guarantee you there's a Star Wars stan that again is watching this right now. That's just like, yeah, well, I mean, how are you going to know that that's a force power until they show it for the first time? I know it's a new force power. It's like, okay, but now you're muddying the waters a lot. And I think it's the tricky thing about introducing like even Wanda or Doctor Strange into an MCU that had previously been primarily science-based, even with Thor kind of trying to do the like, oh yeah, magic is just science that you don't understand yet. You know, like it's they're trying to couch it as like this is a real world where things actually do function on rules, and rules, as I was kind of trying to get to, equal stakes. Like that is where it's like, oh, okay, so people can die in this world. Like in Endgame, Black Widow is not safe, which means Iron Man's not safe, which means Captain America's not safe. You know, like that, and I think that like especially once you have the I heal you from death ability in anything, you're really in danger of like, okay, you're really gonna hurt any tension in any scene ever.
But that is. Yeah, this is a whole different conversation. I don't want to get into that because
it is 11 o'clock, so we should probably call it a day. I also just finished what level is this called? I finished the Green Bay Mall level of Rollerdrome. I'm now in the second stage of the semifinals. And I really recommend Rollerdrome, by the way. Like, I'm not kidding. It's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater with guns, and it's awesome. You're on roller skates. It's not a skateboard, and you can't fall, but you can die. So you don't have to worry about nailing every trick. You regain your ammo by doing tricks. So like that's how you reload. So you're encouraged to like constantly be moving between doing like Tony Hawk tricks and using like bullet time to go and like kill all these enemies. It's pretty sweet. But feel free to watch my VOD on Rumble if you want to check it out, because I've been streaming for like 3 hours now.
That's fun, man.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm gonna go watch House of Dragons, but
I'm gonna hope that X-Ray Girl is not asleep, because then I'll actually be able to watch it too.
I think we should do some other streams sometime. I have a bunch of streams coming up, so I don't know what my availability in the next month, but yeah, we should set something up for like maybe a different topic or something, or do like a video game.
Especially if you don't mind me just fiddling around with a video game and capturing footage in the background. Yeah,
helping me get monetization.
Yeah, no, I can do this pretty much whenever, and if you just let me get my Rumble hours rolling in the background, that's perfectly fine. But hey, like they said you can stream whatever you want so long as you're streaming video games, because we need info on the gaming stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I was like, hey, can I talk about Rings of Power with you while streaming a video game? And I just did it though. I did the like streamers like Destiny and stuff. They're like always playing League of Legends while they're having like playing like high level games like Factorio or League of Legends while like having intense political debates.
Dude, Destiny will talk about like, you know, some extremist political movement from like 60s Czechoslovakia, like some random Eastern European, and he'll be talking about it while he's playing like some shitty like game that he has to focus on like really, really, really hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you've ever played Factorio, but it's not a simple game.
That's what I'm saying.
I've seen him playing it on screen to the point like, is this just B-roll that he's playing, or is he actually playing it now?
And then every so often, like,
but then every so often you'll see him fuck up in the game and then go, ah, shit, and I'm like, oh fuck, he's playing.
Yeah.
So Destiny's a guy with some strange takes as well, but I think that I enjoy him quite a bit. I think he's an interesting I guess you could still
He's a nice
probably call him left wing, although he's kind of like center left now, which is sort of more my wheelhouse.
Well, he's hanging out with Nick Fuentes now, so
yeah. So I guess he's a full blown white nationalist. He's giving up.
He's Destiny is a very genuine person in real. I've met him twice, three times actually.
Yeah, right.
Hung out with him once.
Oh yeah, in Dallas.
He's
right?
the same. In Dallas or Houston at a debate conference. Basically, he's the same. Essentially, he doesn't like to debate in real life. He just like we just chat about like random anything that's not what he does on the internet. It's kind of
and I mean that makes sense.
I feel like that's all of us, That's like we don't.
Well, I mean, I don't think I was really talking about much pop culture stuff at all in Vegas. Like talking to a bunch of the audience members and like the nerdrotic people and stuff. We were just kind of shooting the shit about whatever.
Exactly.
And
like,
it's fun
talking about people and foot sports and stuff. But yeah, a lot of people.
Sports ball.
Yeah, I think he gets a bad rap. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, no, I think his takes are usually quite detailed, and even when I don't agree with him, I think he presents his argument very thoroughly. And it's very clear that he believes what he is saying. I don't think he ever does like weird, or I mean, if he does, I don't really pick up on it. He doesn't seem like the type of debate bro that is like focused on rhetorical games and not actually arguing something that he believes in.
Absolutely. So like I do live streaming debate conferences a couple times a year, and he's one of them. Jack Posobiec, Lauren Southern, we put on these debate live events, and they're really, really fun. I enjoy doing this. It's kind of like just a side thing that I do, but all those people are pretty cool.
That's like the Better Discourse thing that you were at?
It is the Better Discourse thing, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I'm the tech guy.
Oh, okay, right on.
But
yeah, are you in the Texas area? Because that's in Dallas, right?
East Coast. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. So I'm East Coast as well. I'm of the north.
Are you going to the meetup in October?
Yep. I'll be there.
I'm gonna try to make it. I think I have another thing in October, but the fact that it's on Halloween is kind of cool to me.
Yeah, it might be pretty interesting. I gotta find myself a costume of some kind. But
I hope we can wear costumes. Krista said maybe not, but I'll have to talk to her again about it.
Oh, really?
I don't know if the venue allows costumes, but
really?
I could be wrong about that.
That's strange. I guess like that close to Halloween, I'd be like, wait, seriously? Like, what do you think is gonna happen?
Well, I will let you go. Sketch says that he appreciates all of your input.
Oh, thank you very much, Sketch. Yes, sorry I haven't been very involved in either chat. Granted, my Rumble chat's usually pretty low key. If you ever want to just throw something on in the background and not interact, it's safe to say there. I'm not going to give you shit for it. But normally I would be on Lofty stream like interacting with the chat and things like that. But because I was playing a pretty intense video game the entire time.
You're fine, dude.
But you know what? I think it's the Tony Hawk element that makes it that you can kind of get zen. Your thumbs just sort of know what to do, and it's like this game. Roller Drum. It's like $30 on Steam. It's really good.
Oh, I've debated on Flashcast before playing Minecraft, and it's some things. If it's a zen game, it's very fun.
Yeah, I think like my biggest worry about ever being on a podcast or something where I'm playing a game is that I'm just gonna space out and get into the game and not. But I think that this worked well. I think because it's just the two of us talking. So I needed to constantly be engaged with the conversation more so than the game. Whereas I think if it was on a panel of 6, I'd be like, well, by the time it gets back to me, I'm probably going to be more tuned into the game than the conversation. So this might backfire. But anyways, man, take it easy. And man. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate the 1v1. That's the very relaxed conversation.
Thank you, right on, man. Yeah, I'll let you get back to fighting your wars over Lord of the Rings.
All right, dude. Bye-bye.
All right, take it easy.
All right, chat. Thanks for coming to my channel. I really like doing these. I might do more of them. It's kind of hard for me because I have like random stuff going on in the evenings. It's hard to get a schedule going, but I don't know. Maybe I'll do a weekly Rings of Power podcast every Sunday or Monday or something. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. You guys have a good night. Go watch House of Dragons. Just came out today, episode 3. I will talk to you guys later. Bye bye.